Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto and Hinata's clan hated each other. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
There were a variety of people in the village, concealed among the leaves, including the village leader, politicians, and regular citizens. There were, nevertheless, also unique individuals in this village known as shinobi, who possessed extraordinary skill and strength, as well as a clan. Specific hidden military force. However, the vampire and lichen clans, also referred to as the Hyuga and Namikaze clans, were the two most powerful clans in Konoha. These two clans have been at each other's throats since the village's founding, constantly lusting for blood, but they have never killed one another because of the strength of the village leader, Hokage, who stopped their fighting and forced them to agree to a trace. As a result, nothing changed between the two clans until the birth of their newest heirs. Over the years, they would quarrel over various issues, friend one another, and battle over territory and customs. The Namikaze clan joyfully celebrated the birth of Namikaze Minato's son on October 10th. The young boy had blonde hair, blue eyes, and whisker marks on both sides of his face, just like his father Namikaze Minato, and a pair of lungs like his mother Uzumaki Kushina. They named him Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, the heir of the Lichen clan. The fact that the night of his birth was a full moon further indicated that he was destined for greatness. A young girl with her mother's appearance was born on December 27th to the Hyuga clan. Her parents were pleased with the child and knew she would lead the clan to glory, which was her destiny because she was born on a night when the moon was red, a sign of greatness for Hyuga Hinata, the heir to the vampire clan. However, despite the fact that these two were born into opposing clans, fate frequently takes them down extremely enigmatic paths that only fate knows about, and the connections she makes will leave people in awe for all eternity, much like what happened to Naruto and Hinata. After 5 years, it was a typical day in Konoha, with people going about their daily lives, buying and selling goods, ninjas going on missions, and kids playing in the park and relishing in their purity. Despite being the future of their clans, two of these children were the heirs of the Hyuga and Namikaze clans. As such, their mothers were able to persuade their husbands to act like children by threatening to sleep on the couch until they agreed, which they did. Soon after, both children were in the park, watching the other children play games and enjoying themselves, wondering why they needed to be friends at all when they had their entire clan. To which each mother replied, however, you need to have friends your own age outside of the clan to help you better understand people. After agreeing, the two kids set out to make friends with the other kids, but things didn't work out. Rather, the kids tried their best to ignore the clan heirs because they were different from them and didn't want to interact with them. Naruto went to the swing sit to wait for his mother to take him home after giving up on attempting to make friends with the other kids. Naruto saw that someone else was there, too, and that no one wanted to play with her. Thinking that this would be his chance to make friends, he approached the girl and said, "Hello. My name is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Just call me Naruto. What's your name?" In the courteous manner his mother had taught him to do around girls. The girl initially ignored him, assuming he was speaking to someone else, but when he repeated the question and got her attention, she asked timidly, "Are you talking to me?" Naruto simply smiled and said, "Of course." The girl turned to face him and said, "My name is Hyuga Hinata, and it's nice to meet you." Hinata smiled in response. When Naruto asked her what was on his mind, he asked, "Why are you all alone?" Hinata simply looked at the ground once more and said, "No one wants to be near me, they don't like me because I'm different." This made Naruto angry because he detested seeing girls cry, so he did the only thing that came to mind. "So what if you are different that makes you special, and if they can't see that then they don't deserve to be your friend?" he said calmly as he put his arms around her. Hinata smiled, gave him a hug in return, and muttered, "Thank you." The mothers of the children were located in a small area on the opposite side of the park. Hyuga Aki and Namikaze Kushina were not enemies, but they were also not friends. The two greet one another as courteously as possible after they first see one another, saying, "Hyuga," and "Namikaze." After a brief period of silence during which the two sat side by side, Kushina, who never can sit still for very long, turned to Aki and asked, "So, how are things with your clan?" "Fine. We have received a generous amount of blood from the Hokage. Please thank your husband for that." Aki looked at her, trying to see if she was insulting her, but she didn't see anything. "It wasn't a problem, he just wants to help everyone in the village, the big softy," she said, laughing as Kushina simply grinned at her. Aki simply glanced at her, laughed, and made the decision to strike up a conversation by asking, "So, how is your son?" She laughed and said, "How is little Hinata doing?" Kushina simply stared at her and said, He's a good boy, a lot like his father, but a bit of a monster sometimes. She's fine, we started her training, and it's kind of funny that when you look at her she has my looks but she has her father's personality when he was at that age, Aki said with her trademark smile. With tears in her eyes, Kushina erupted in laughter at this point. Hyuga Haishi, the head of the Hyuga clan, used to be a shy kid that stutters ha 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 ha, she uttered. It's not funny, Aki said sternly, looking at her. She couldn't help but laugh at how Haishi used to blush and stutter around new people as a child, especially when she was around him. Perhaps that's why she fell in love with him when she was younger. It took some time for Kushina to stop laughing, but eventually she relaxed and remembered last night. When she smiled, Aki noticed and asked, "What are you smiling at, or do I even want to know?" "I was just thinking of the fun me and Minato-kun had last night. It was a full moon after all," Kushina said, glancing at her. Kushina simply used this to respond, "What's the matter, bitter because you're not getting any lately?" While Aki simply looked at her in disgust and said, "I'm sorry I asked." After blushing and turning away, Aki replied, "If you most know, me and Haishi were intimate not too long ago." After giving her a quick glance and grinning, Kushina said, "That's what I'm talking about, learn to live a little." Aki simply sighed, grinned, and turned to Kushina, saying, "Thank you, Kushina." Kushina simply asked, "For what?" after giving her a perplexed look. "For just being you." Aki smiled in response, and Kushina then grinned and said, "No problem." The two continued talking until they realized it was getting late and that they needed to take the kids home. They looked together in the hopes of introducing them, but they couldn't find them. Instead, they heard laughter coming from behind a tree, and while Naruto was hanging upside down by his foot claws, he saw his mother and a woman who resembled Hinata but was older. Naruto let go after seeing both women and yelled, "Ka-san," to his mother. Kushina grinned and said, "Hey Naruto-kun, did you make any new friends today?" With a simple smile, Naruto said, "I did see." He then introduced him to his mother, saying, "This is Hinata-chan." When both mothers heard this, they both thought, "Chan." With a slight flush, Hinata approached Kushina and bowed, saying, N. Nice to meet you Namikaze, Sama." Kushina liked the girl right away. She was kind and courteous, but she was nervous, which he thought could be resolved with some time spent with Naruto. Naruto chose to attempt the same thing as Hinata was introducing herself to Kushina. He approached Aki, bowed his head, and said, "It's nice to meet you," in a courteous manner. Hyuga. Sama. The fact that a boy from a clan that had previously caused the Hyuga clan nothing but trouble was so courteous surprised Aki a little. He must really want to impress me, Aki thought to herself. Hyuga. Sama, could I ask you 2 questions? Naruto asked Aki as they were ready to depart after the introductions. When Aki looked at him, she saw no harm and said, "Go ahead, Naruto." "Well, when Hinata gets older, will she be as pretty as you or will she be even better?" Naruto asked, merely glancing at her. Everyone was stunned at this point. Hinata was flushed, Kushina was surprised that her son was already attracted to a girl, and Aki was taken aback that Naruto not only thought her daughter was attractive but also that the boy had taste. Naruto. Sama, do you really think that my daughter is pretty? Aki asked the boy, glancing at him. Naruto simply grinned and told her, "No, I think she's beautiful." Everyone turned to see that Hinata had fainted when a loud thud was heard, and Naruto rushed to her in panic as Aki merely rubbed her temples and muttered, "Of all the things to inherit from her father." With an expression of intense concern, Naruto stood over Hinata and said, "Hinata-chan, please wake up. I'm sorry for what I did, please wake up." Hinata noticed Naruto's facial whisker marks and started to trace over them as she was just beginning to wake up and saw him inches from her face. Naturally, Naruto tensed up and fell on top of her as soon as she did that. Hinata then noticed that Naruto was purring and twitching his right foot. "What's he doing?" Aki asked Kushina, and Kushina replied, "I wish I had a camera, this would be perfect blackmail." The two looked at the children and simply lay on top of each other. "It's a soft spot that the Namikaze have, you just rub it and they start purring a kitten, which doesn't make sense from a clan descended from wolves," Kushina said with a laugh. They were going to depart after Naruto had recovered and disengaged from Hinata when Aki realized he had one more question for her. "Naruto, didn't you have another question for me?" she asked him. The question he was about to ask, why do you have 2 cents Hyuga? Sama, came back to Naruto as he glanced at her. What did he mean by 2 cents? Aki was perplexed. Since humans are incapable of having sense, she looked to Kushina for clarification, but her expression was one of incomprehension. There was a pause before Kushina finally exclaimed, "Oh my Kami, you are pregnant." Both Aki and Hinata were rendered mute by this, and Aki overcame her tremors to whisper, I'm pregnant," as she held her stomach. "Are you sure?" Aki asked Kushina, who nodded and clarified that females give off another scent when they are with child. There's your scent and then there's the scent of the baby inside you. Aki was struggling to breathe as she pondered, who will the clan react? How will Heishi react? What if he doesn't want another child? What if he wants an abortion? She was still in a different reality, unable to believe she was going to have another child. Kushina positioned herself behind her and started massaging her back while instructing her to take deep breaths. In contrast, Hinata was doing a little better than her mother. She was excited to be a big sister but was still apprehensive about her father's reaction. Fortunately, Naruto was there to support her. Kushina offered to accompany Aki home after she had calmed down and be present when she told Heishi about the baby, but they stopped at the Namikaze clan house first. Two wolves twice as large as a typical dog greeted Naruto and Kushina as they passed through the gate. The largest of the wolves, who was primarily black and blue, turned to face Kushina and uttered the words, "Greetings Kushina. Sama, Naruto." Sama, which made the two Hyugas wince. As soon as the wolves saw the two Hyugas, they bared their teeth, growled, and yelled, "What do you want?" Aki resisted, but Hinata ducked behind Naruto. The wolf flinched when Kushina yelled, "Kuroi," before things got out of control because the Namikaze clan was a pack and you never pissed off the alpha male or female. With a savage glare, Kushina stood beside him and said, "Kuroi, these two are our guests, and you will show respect towards them if that understood." The wolves nodded their heads and said, "Hello, Kushina. Sama," to which she added, "Also get my husband out here." The wolves left after hearing the command, and eventually a man wearing traditional clan head robes emerged. Because she had heard from the clan elders that the Namikaze were nothing more than repulsive creatures who would be better off dead, and that their leader was the most vicious of all the beasts, Hinata was terrified of him when she first saw him. However, Hinata saw a good man who was also a caring father and the village leader when she looked at Naruto's father. Minato was shocked to find two Hyuga in the compound when he came forward to find out what his wife wanted. They weren't just any Hyuga, though. The head of the Hyuga clan's wife and the clan heir herself were hiding behind his son. "What do you need, Kushina? Chan?" Minato asked his wife, looking at her. Kushina grinned at her husband and explained her need. "I need you to help me get an audience with the Hyuga clan head." Instead of responding to Minato's question, "Why would you want to do that?" Kushina shoved Aki in front of him and said, "Smell her." Everyone around him gave this suspicious looks, but Minato knew his wife had a purpose for everything she did, so he sniffed her and saw that she was sending and receiving other signals. Then it hit him. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" he asked Aki, who simply nodded her head. Minato could see what was happening. His wife wanted to help in case something went wrong and had discovered that Aki was pregnant, probably because of Naruto. His thoughts then turned to the first time he brought Kushina to meet the family and how, like a shy rabbit, she hid behind him when his father came to meet her. He then turned to face Naruto and Hinata, who was hiding behind him. When Hinata saw Minato grinning at the girl, her fear of him vanished. As soon as the group arrived at the Hyuga compound, a few branch members welcomed them and went to let Heishi know about his guests. As soon as Heishi was in sight, he saw the Hokage standing next to his wife and daughter, along with his wife and son. Heishi asked his wife, "Aki, what's troubling you?" after noticing that she was contemplating something. Fearing what her husband might do, Aki looked at him and said, "Heishi-kun, I'm pregnant, again." She had loved him for a long time and had even given birth to a child. Heishi simply gave her a quick smile before fainting, which made everyone start to perspire. Naruto then revealed his moth and remarked, "I think he took it pretty well." Enjoy and leave reviews as this will be another crossover between Naruto and Underworld. Neither of them are mine. After meeting for the first time several months prior, Naruto and Hinata continued to grow closer as friends, at times wishing they were closer. However, as the two had been growing closer, the elders of each clan were complaining and bitching about how the enemy was corrupting their respective clan heirs. Naruto and Hinata were supposed to avoid each other every day, but they disregarded this directive and sneaked off to meet in the park, the ramen bar, or the forest just to spend time together. Before long, months had passed, and Hinata's mother was due, and everyone was anxious, well, mostly Heishi and Hinata, about what might go wrong on the day of the baby's birth. Before the three Hyugas heard the guards shouting, "Get back here you little bastard," Hinata and her parents were enjoying a nice dinner and their blood. Everything was quiet until the door crashed down, revealing Naruto and the two guards. Glancing at her friend, Hinata grinned and exclaimed, "Naruto-kun." Looking up from the floor, Naruto grinned broadly, scratched the back of his head, and said, "Hey Hinata-chan, I was in the neighborhood and I thought I would come in and say hi." Looking at the boy with annoyance, Heishi said, "Namikaze-sama, do you have any real business with my clan?" He didn't trust Naruto, but he had nothing against him because he had made his daughter happy, and that was what mattered. "Nope," Naruto said, glancing at Hinata's father, "just wanted to say hi to Hinata-chan and see how the baby was doing." "The baby's doing fine Naruto-kun, it could be born any day and..." "Ah," Aki said in response to Hinata's laughter. Hinata, Heishi, and Naruto all appeared alarmed as Aki screamed and clenched her stomach. Heishi turned to face his wife in concern and asked, "Aki-chan, what's wrong?" Aki turned to face him and uttered, "My water broke, the baby's coming off." Heishi had to take her to the hospital immediately because he was afraid. As this was happening, Hinata was crying and unsure of what to do. Naruto wanted to help, but he was unsure of what he could do. He closed his eyes and felt something inside of him that was similar to the feeling he gets on a full moon, but more primal. When Heishi saw that Naruto had changed his voice, he was about to shout for someone to go to the hospital. Naruto said, "Heishi-sama, I'll get the hospital ready. Just get Aki-sama there." "Naruto-kun, are you okay?" Hinata asked, looking at Naruto with some concern. Naruto opened them to reveal that they were entirely black, and he snarled. Then, his body started to change. His muscles grew larger, his hair grew everywhere, his skin turned gray, and he started to resemble a wolf. Like human. Before Hinata could inquire as to what was wrong, Naruto got down on all fours and started running as quickly as he could. He was nearly at the hospital in 30 seconds. When he arrived, Naruto sprinted directly to the door, not slowing down, and smashed the glass as he passed through the window, frightening the front desk staff at the sight of a huge animal entering through the glass door. They recognized him when they saw the animal transform into a young boy and exclaimed, "Naruto-sama, what is the meaning of this?" Naruto simply stared at the receptionist and uttered the words, "Aki-sama, having, baby, need, room," in between breaths before passing out on the ground. When the nurses and other people in the lobby heard this, they started to disperse and set up everything they would need for the Hyuga family. They also took Naruto to a room so they could examine him because of the scratches from the glass. Using their own kind of metamorphosis, which gave them enhanced senses, strength, and wings for flight, something that only a Hyuga elder or prodigy could accomplish, the Hyugas were flying as quickly as possible to the hospital. The family saw that the hospital's glass windows were broken and that the medical staff was waiting with a stretcher ready for anything when they got there. The head physician and two nurses greeted the Hyugas as soon as they entered the building, promising to look after Aki and reassure Heishi and Hinata that everything would be alright. Hinata asked the doctor, "Where's Naruto-kun?" as she glanced around at the shattered glass and the subtle blood odor while the adults were conversing. The doctor was about to reply when there was a loud, "Hinata-chan," and everyone turned to see Naruto, who was wearing a bandage, waving at Hinata. This sparked an equally loud, "Naruto-kun," and she rushed to embrace him. From a distance, her face turned blue. The words, "Hinata-chan, can't, breath," were uttered by Hinata as she was choking Naruto to death. Hinata released her grip and turned completely red. After completing that, Heishi approached Naruto and said, "Namikaze-sama." Naruto stared at Heishi until he responded, "Why did you bother to help my family?" After glancing at Hinata's father, Naruto merely said, "I wanted to help." In order to help, the boy underwent a complete metamorphosis at a young age. Heishi was taken aback and asked the boy, "Why would you want to help?" Because he couldn't understand why a boy from a clan that outright despised his clan would want to help. Heishi looked at Naruto and responded, "Because if something happens to the baby Aki-sama would be sad and so would Hinata-chan, and I don't want them to be sad. Hinata's my friend and I really care about her." Hinata's face turned red again, darker this time, and she could hear her heart pounding more rapidly as she heard the phrase, "I really care about her," play repeatedly in her head. Still suspicious of the boy's intentions, Heishi chose to end the conversation there and told the boy, "Naruto-sama, I need to be in the delivery room with my wife, so I'm entrusting you to look after Hinata until my return. Understand?" After Heishi said, "Good, I will return when the baby is born," Naruto simply nodded his head up and down. Heishi then departed, leaving Hinata to wait for any updates in the lobby. Naruto was bored to death and Hinata was afraid that something might go wrong while they were sitting on the couch. Naruto saw this and tried to reassure her that everything would be fine by saying, "Hinata-chan, it's okay, everything will be fine, you'll see." Hinata truly wanted to believe him, but she was unable to do so because she was terrified that something would go wrong and that both her cousin and the baby would perish. Until she felt Naruto wrap around her, she was able to put an end to these thoughts. In order to calm her down, Naruto said, "Hinata-chan, stop worrying. Your cousin will be fine, and so will the baby, so relax, okay?" He had to try it again because it seemed to work the first time they met. With a sense of calm, Hinata uttered, "Naruto-kun, arigato." You would expect them to let go after that, of course, but Hinata expected Naruto to hold on to her instead, which made her blush. She then heard him say, "Hinata-chan," to which she replied, "Yes, Naruto-kun," and he added, "You smell really nice, Hinata-chan." As a result, Hinata's face turned redder, and she responded, "Arigato Naruto-kun." Naruto then placed its head close to her neck and started purring, which Hinata thought was a certain sound. Shortly afterward, someone said, "Is my little Naru-chan purring for Hinata?" The mother of Kushina Naruto was standing there grinning, knowing that she had the ultimate form of blackmail on her son, when the two children turned to face her. Now that his cousin was present, Naruto was perspiring and her eyes were evil. If his Atusan had also been present, this situation might have gotten worse, but Kami already detested Naruto. Everyone turned to see a tall, elderly Naruto standing in front of them, and Naruto became anxious upon seeing him. "Naruto!" exclaimed Atusan. The village's Hokage and the head of the Lycan clan, Namikaze Minato, Naruto's father, was standing there. With a serious expression on his face, Minato asked his son, "Naruto, why are you here with a Hyuga no less?" Naruto tried to explain what was happening to his father, whom he had never seen in this state before, saying, "Atusan, I was paying Hinata-chan a visit and when I got there, Aki-sama's water broke and they needed a room ready in the hospital, so I ran here real fast, somehow told the doctors what was going on and passed out." Kushina grinned at her son, who had done something admirable, and his father agreed. "Naruto, what you did was very noble and something that our clan has never done before when it comes to Hinata's clan," Minato said, grinning at his son. Looking at his father, Naruto asked, "Atusan, why does our clan hate Hinata-chan's clan so much anyway?" This question had been bothering him since the day he first met Hinata. Though Hinata had been wondering why they had started all this fighting in the first place, she looked at Naruto and wondered why he would want to know something like that. Kushina also searched through all of the clan's records, including those from the early days of Konoha, to find out what had been causing the animosity between the two for so long, but she found nothing. Minato answered all of their questions by saying, "I don't know what started all this, and now that I think about it, I don't even think the oldest of the elders knows." He could tell by the expressions on everyone's faces that they were all wondering the same thing. "Then why do we still keep fighting instead of being friends like me and Hinata-chan are?" asked Naruto, looking at his father in an innocent tone. Minato told his son, "Naruto, throughout the clan's history, we were believed from an early age to despise the Hyuga clan for whatever reason, and so were they for us." Minato wished he could still be as innocent as he had been as a child, but he simply couldn't. Naruto simply stared at his father, attempting to make sense of what he was saying, but it didn't make sense. He might not have encountered every Hyuga, and those that he did encounter occasionally gave him glares, but that didn't mean he should despise them. After observing his son's perplexed expression, Minato made the decision to shift the conversation. With a fake smile, Minato turned to face his son and inquired, "So, Naruto, I hear you were able to transform for the first time." "Yep, it was so cool, I could see and hear and move way better than before. It felt like there was a full moon that would never go away and I like it," Naruto said, grinning broadly as he turned to face his father. Both Kushina and Minato grinned at their sons as they recalled their initial metamorphoses, which ultimately resulted in the initial conception of Naruto. "Naruto-kun, what were you feeling before you transformed?" Kushina asked her son, glancing at him. After examining his mother and considering the possible causes, Naruto said aloud, "I remember Hinata's cousin was in pain, a lot of pain, and Hinata-chan was crying. I hate seeing Hinata-chan cry." When Hinata heard that Naruto didn't like seeing her in pain, she blushed, and Naruto's parents snickered. Further, Naruto remarked, grinning and scratching the back of his head, "Hinata-chan was crying and I had to do something, anything. I was useless, I hated it, I wanted to do anything, and then I felt something in me, something primal and then I was here and telling the doctors about Hinata. Chan's cousin and then I passed out and also broke a window on the way in. With a smile, Minato turned to face his son, who had discovered the secret to transformation at a young age. Shortly after, a nurse arrived, glanced at Hinata, and said, Naruto. Sama, you have been asked to accompany her, and Hinata. Sama, you can go visit your cousin now. As Naruto lay on the ground being pulled by her, Hinata grinned, took Naruto's hand, and ran to the room where her mother was. When the children arrived at the room where Hinata's mother was staying, they rushed in. Well, Hinata rushed in and turned to face her mother, who was lying in bed, with her father standing beside her. Naruto was still on the floor, face down, holding Hinata's hand. Hinata. Chan, come here and take a look at your baby sister, Aki said, grinning and holding a small bundle in her arms as she gave her daughter a weak look. A small baby girl with long hair, tiny hands, and a cute face was sleeping when Hinata and Naruto, who had just woken up and had a large skid mark on his face, came over to look at the young Hyuga. While Hinata was grinning at the young girl she would be referring to as her sister, Naruto was amazed by her small size and felt her warmth. Then Hinata turned to face her mother and pleaded, please let me hold her, cousin. Aki gave Hinata a smile and gave her the baby, which Hinata took gently in her arms and grinned at as she looked down at her. Naturally, when Hinata woke up and turned to face her older sibling, she said, hello, I'm your Nichan Hinata. The infant smiled and blinked a few times, displaying her pale white eyes like the rest of her family. Naruto.kun, would you like to hold her too? Hinata asked Naruto as she was doing this. Heishi appeared to want to protest, but he owed the boy and didn't want to upset his wife, who was in a weaker state. Naruto was a little anxious about what might go wrong or what mistakes he might make when he looked at Hinata, but before he could say no, Hinata was already giving him her sister. Unable to deny it, Naruto took the young girl in his arms, smiled down at her, and said, hello, my name is Naruto, and I'm your Nichan's friend. It's nice to meet you. As he was saying that, he noticed that the baby was, for some reason, staring at his face. The baby then reached out and started to rub Naruto's face with his whiskers, which made him purr and made the baby laugh. Naruto's parents entered shortly after a knock on the door. When Kushina saw Aki, she grinned with joy for her and a hint of jealousy because she wanted a child of her own and she thought she heard a loud ticking sound coming from somewhere. Naruto, it's time for us to leave. You should go home, get some rest, and begin your academy studies, Minato said, glancing at his son. But Atu-san, I want to stay and spend more time with Hinata. Chan and the baby, Naruto said, glaring at his father. Although Minato could relate to his son's feelings, he needed to be prepared for everything that would occur tomorrow because the elders had probably heard by now about Naruto's transformation. Naruto. Sama, your Otu-san is right, you need rest along with the baby, Aki. Chan and Hinata need their rest as well, Hiyashi said as Minato opened his mouth to speak. Naruto saw the logic in this and agreed, returning the baby to Aki. Where's this stork anyway? Naruto asked, turning around as the three were leaving. When Minato asked, Naruto, what are you talking about? All of the adults turned to look at Naruto and try to understand what he was saying. The stork, Akio. Oji-san told me that all babies come from a stork, a big bird or something, so where is it? Naruto said, turning to face his father. Minato looked at his infant and calmly replied, Naruto, that not where babies come from, your Oji-san was messing with you because if a stork did deliver you on the day you were born, I have no doubt in my mind you would have taken a bit out of it. With a questioning glance at his father, Naruto questioned, so where do babies come from? Looking at his son, Minato said, hey Naruto, how about we grab some ramen on the way home? Minato mentally slapped himself, saying, I should have seen that coming. Damn you Akio, I'm going to get you for this, but right now I got to figure out a way out of this, that's it. Naruto looked at Hinata and said, good night, Hinata. Chan and baby. What's the kid's name anyway? As he started to jump around like a monkey on crank and speed, saying, ramen, alright, let's go. Everyone turned to face one another at this point, and Heishi slapped himself, saying, I knew we forgot something. How about calling the baby Hanabi or something? Naruto then retorted. After giving Naruto a quick glance, Hinata exclaimed, Hanabi, fire flower, I like it. In response, Aki said, so do I. The Namikaze family quickly arrived home, was welcomed by everyone, and went to bed after everyone had said their goodbyes and Naruto had finished his ramen. Before long, everyone in the clan house was asleep, with the exception of Minato and Kushina. When Minato saw Kushina at the foot of the bed staring at him, he was about to jump into bed. He went to ask her, Kushina-chan, is something wrong? But she didn't respond. Kushina-chan, what's up? You've been quiet since we left the hospital. Still no response, so Kushina snarled and threw herself at her maid onto the bed. To claim that he wasn't enjoying any of this would be a goddamn lie. Minato was in a state of shock as his partner lay on top of him, pressing her tongue into his mouth while groaning lustfully. After shutting her mouth, Kushina smirked at her partner's perplexed expression. Kushina-chan, what's gotten into you? Minato asked his wife after some blood had returned to his head on his shoulders. After glancing at him, Kushina merely said, pups. Minato blinked and said, Nani, and Kushina repeated, I want pups now. Kushina then tore off Minato's clothing, leaving him completely naked. The following morning, everyone couldn't help but stare at their clan leader and his wife without feeling uncomfortable. Minato's bags under his eyes, which indicated that he hadn't gotten enough sleep, and his inability to stay awake were evident, while Kushina's glowing appearance was evident. Until Naruto entered the clan dining room and was greeted by his family, everyone wanted to ask what was going on between the two, but they were hesitant. Morning Naruto, said the boy, looking at his family and rubbing his eyes. When Naruto turned to face his parents, he saw that something was a little strange about them. His mother appeared somewhat girly, which was not typical of tomboyish women, and his father appeared as though he could pass out at any moment. As Naruto was about to inquire about her condition, one of the cooks entered the room and declared, breakfast is ready. The breakfast consisted of pancakes, toast, sausage, ramen, eggs, and most importantly, steak, leaving everyone with the single thought, meat. Shortly after, drinks were served, including coffee, milk, orange juice, and, of course, sake, which was reserved for the adults and clan elders. Sho, a 5-year-old cousin of Naruto, had green eyes and black hair, and she looked at him last night, wondering where he was. Sho was the most responsible of the pups and frequently worried about Naruto because he was the youngest in the clan heir. While everyone else was shoving food into their mouths, some members were even choking on their food. Naruto-kun, where exactly were you last night and how come you came home so late? Sho asked, looking at her cousin as he inhaled his extra beef ramen like it was water. Naruto simply stared at her, and since he didn't respond, Sho continued, you are starting the academy very soon. You must be focusing on your studies to bring honor to the clan name. Naruto continued to eat his ramen, but he looked at her and simply said, did you say something? Sho slammed her head against the table and said, damn Kakashi. Sho looked at Naruto and said in a sweet voice, Naru-chan, if you don't tell me where you were last night, I'll make that lil Hyuga girl you call a friend find out about that lil bed-wetting problem of yours. Naruto continued eating his ramen, not really paying attention to what Sho was saying, which enraged her and gave her an evil idea. When Naruto heard this, he froze and started shackling, saying, why? You can't prove a thing. Sho's smile changed from evil to demonic, saying, but I can prove it Naru-chan, and I'm sure the rest of the pups can too. Naruto glanced at all of his other cousins and saw evil smiles on their faces. He then sighed in defeat and gave in. Naruto then went on to describe how he entered the Hyuga compound, how Hinata's mother's water broke, how he changed and attracted everyone's attention, and how he broke into the hospital. Everyone stared at Naruto at this point, motionless, until they all yelled, Nani, at once, reverberating throughout the village, and Naruto simply stared at his family, asking himself, did I do something wrong? Naruto rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment at the attention he was receiving after hearing his older cousin's praise. Sho simply glanced at her cousin and said, Naruto, you're even 6 and you managed to pull off something not even a prodigy could do. That's amazing. The attention Naruto was receiving didn't last long, though, because one of his aunts had to inquire, so how did you do it, Naruto-kun? Everyone started to perspire when Naruto heard this and simply said, I don't know, while glancing at his aunt. As Haru started to yell at Naruto, you are telling us that you managed to do something that all of us have been working on for years and you get it on your first try and don't even know how. Naruto simply replied, yep, that it, and started eating his ramen. How the hell could you not know? Was the question posed by Haru, Naruto's older cousin by 4 years. Haru simply looked at his cousin with a killer intent meant for someone of Chunin level. I bet you lying, Haru said, looking down at his younger cousin, still furious. Naruto became enraged at his cousin's accusation of lying and slammed his hands on the table, glaring at Haru and saying, I'm not lying, I was able to transform. You're just mad that I was able to something you can't. When Haru heard this, he became even more irate and said, stop it, I don't want to hear your lies. There is no way you can transform, you're just making it to get attention from everyone just because you're the heir. Naruto then got up and glared at Haru, saying, I have proof Hinata. Chan and Heishi. Sama saw me do it. He also glared at his cousin, who knocked over his ramen without caring, saying, oh shit, it's a sign, the end is near, we're all go die. Haru didn't care about that, he just wanted to keep sneering at Naruto. So the white-eyed leeches saw you transform, big deal, the word of a Hyuga is worth nothing. Naruto continued to glare at his cousin, shut up, not all the Hyuga are bad. At this point, Haru started to laugh, saying, don't be stupid Naruto. All Hyuga are scum and need to be wiped out just like this Hinata. As his cousin continued, the Hyuga are nothing but leeches and this Hinata is not your friend. Naruto clenched his fist, not realizing that his claws had grown and were causing his palms to bleed. Naruto simply muttered, shut up, she will betray you in the end, she has you wrapped around her finger like some common dog, and shut up. Once she has gotten her fun with you, she will stab you in the back like some common whore. That was a huge mistake. Shut up, was Naruto's tone of voice, which shocked everyone as he attacked Haru and knocked him to the ground. Everyone was staring at Naruto, whose eyes were pure black, his claws longer than usual, and his whisker marks deeper than usual. Cho stared at her baby cousin in terror, wondering what he would do to Haru and what he would do in his state of mind. Everyone who saw this was either amazed, aunts, uncles, or afraid of his metamorphosis, Naruto's cousins. Kushina's hand on Naruto's shoulder, however, seemed to calm him down a bit and his features returned to normal, as Cho's fears were soon allayed. Kushina smiled down at her son and said, Naruto-kun, please calm down, I will talk to Haru, just walk it off and get to your studies and maybe we will go see Hinata-chan today. Naruto excused himself and went to his room upon hearing this. Upon his departure, Kushina glared down at Haru, causing everyone to tremble in terror. At first, she did nothing but slapped him across the face. Haru touched his aunt's cheek where he was experiencing the sensation, asking, Kushina, Obasan, what was that for? At this, Haru became enraged, asking, why the hell would I want to get to know a Hyuga, they're all scum, even this Hin. Kushina simply glared down at her nephew and said, Haru, I'm very disappointed in you for talking about someone while never even meeting this person. Haru didn't get a chance to finish his sentence before Kushina grabbed him by the throat and held him in midair while staring at him with pure black eyes. Now you listen to me. Haru was overcome with dread. Hinata is a good person and I will not tolerate you or anyone talking about her like that without at least meeting once. As she said this, she was staring at everyone. Now I understand you all have a reason to hate the Hyuga, even if none you know what caused this stupid feud between the clans, but don't put Hinata and Naruto's friendship in between it. At this point, Kushina released Haru and turned to face the youngest member of the clan. Now I want you all to listen, Kushina said, and the children turned to their aunt. I am proud of Naruto being friends with Hinata. It's a step in getting over this feud and moving forward between our two clans. Many of the older Namakazes didn't like where this was going, but some of them enjoyed hearing it. The children simply nodded their heads. Take his example, there's a chance you'll be put on a team with a Hyuga and you'll be allies expected to work together, understood? The older clan members understood what she was trying to say when she said, now this Hyuga will be your teammate and there will come a time that you and this Hyuga and your other teammate will become close and precious to one another, got that? The children simply nodded, taking Kushina's words to heart, even Haru. And since that person is precious to you, then you will fight for them and become stronger because of that, got it? A family member stood up and asked, Kushina, Sama, are you really? Kushina turned to them again and said, there may come a time where Hinata may be a dinner guest in the near future and well as someone else. As she said this, Kushina started to unconsciously rub her stomach, which caused many of the family members to look at her with shock and happiness. Kushina looked at him and grinned, saying, there will be a new addition to this family, so please don't do anything to cause me stress. She then walked out of the room with Minato. All of the Namikaze family members started discussing this new information after she left. The men were referring to a new period in the clan's history. The women were talking about spoiling a newborn. The fact that they would be receiving a new cousin also made the kids happy. The elders compared the sound of a new grandchild to spoil and a new lead to carry on their legacy into the future, even though they did not like the idea of having a Hyuga in their home. The Namikaze house's exterior, Naruto was sitting outside at one of the ponds where the koi fish are kept in the middle of the clan house garden, looking down at himself with disgust. Naruto looked down at his reflection in the water and said, don't you think you're being too little too hard on yourself? This was the most disrespectful thing he had ever said to his clan. The cannibal. Naruto turned around to see his mother and father looking down at him. Naruto turned away when he saw them because he didn't want them to see him in this state. After hearing their son say that word, Minato and Kushina looked down at him pityingly, wondering what he would do. Both of them were aware that Naruto was a good kid and quite mature for his age, despite his tendency toward hyperactivity and dimness. As he tried to think of a way to lift his son out of his depression, Minato looked down at him. "How about I show you a new jutsu today, Naruto?" He asked his son, but he received no answer. There was still no reaction when he pulled out the big gun. "We could get some ramen later," and the air became chilly. When he reacted this way, both parents looked down at one another and thought, "Keep all sharp objects away from him." This was causing concern for both parents until Kushina had a brilliant idea. "Naruto-kun, how about we go and see Hinata-chan later?" she asked, glancing at her son. Naruto smiled slightly and replied, "Okay." Minato had to ask Naruto, "Naruto, do you understand how you were able to transform?" As he saw the joy return to his son's face, Naruto gave his father a look that suggested he was still in the dark about it. "Tell me, Naruto, what did you feel each time you transformed?" Minato asked his son with a smile. The young Lycan looked at his parents and smiled, saying, "The transformation is done by the need to protect the ones precious to you, like how Hinata-chan is precious to me." He blushed as he said, "Each time I felt the transformation, it had to do with Hinata-chan. I wanted to protect her in some way, and that's it." As Minato continued to explain the transformation, he grinned at his wife. When a person wants to protect someone close to them, then they are given to strength to do things beyond what they should be normally capable of, all to protect their precious people, Minato said, looking down at his son emotionlessly. "Naruto, that's right. And who are you precious people, Naruto?" Kushina asked her son. "Well, there's Hinata-chan, of course," thought Naruto, as his parents snickered at this. "And her parents along with the baby, everyone in the clan, Oji-san, Ero, Sanin, and Ba-chan." Kushina then spoke up, "I wonder he comes up with these names anyway." Minato gave her a twitching eye and remarked, "Gee, I wonder." The young boy looked at his mother in confusion, and Kushina took his hand and placed it on her stomach, saying, "You forgot the child growing in me." Naruto was paralyzed at the sound of this and started to smell his mother. She either didn't hear him or didn't care. She simply kept her eyes on Naruto and smiled. "You have left someone out, Naruto-kun." When he noticed the distinct scent blending with his mother, he realized it was real. He shouted loud enough for the whole village to hear, and he started to run up and down with excitement as he looked up at his mother and said, "I'm going to be an Oni-san, sweet." Then he dashed to the compound's entrance. When Minato saw this, he yelled, "Where are you going, Naruto?" The boy simply turned to face his father and said, "I'll tell Hinata-chan later," before leaving. "Do you think we should go after him, Minato?" The two parents asked each other. "Go ahead and try, and good luck," he said to his wife. With the exception of Hanabi, who was receiving her blood through breastfeeding with her mother, the family was enjoying breakfast and a glass of blood as Naruto ran towards the Hyuga compound. The Hyuga family was quiet, at least until, "Get back here, damn it." The family turned to face the door where the noise was coming from, and as they did, the doors flew open, revealing two guards and a boy with blonde hair. Naruto-kun was the first thing they saw when they looked at the blonde hair, and Hinata moved to her friend to remove the guards from him. Naruto greeted the family with, "Morning, Aki-sama, Hashi-sama, Hinata-chan." After everything had been resolved and the guards had returned to their posts, he then went to where Aki was and grinned, saying, "And good morning to you, Hanabi-chan." Hanabi turned to face Naruto upon hearing his voice and started to squeal upon seeing him. When Aki saw this, she realized that Hanabi was usually very quiet unless she was with her sister and, judging from the appearance of things, Naruto as well. Aki thought, Hanabi seems to like him a lot, like a possible brother. As she looked down, Naruto was covering his face with his hands to make Hanabi laugh, which is exactly what happened. Hanabi really likes him, and so does Hinata. Maybe this could. Aki thought to herself. But as soon as she snapped out of her reverie, she saw Naruto looking at her. When Aki asked him, "Naruto-kun, is something wrong?" he would only respond, "Aki-sama, why is your chest so big?" Aki also noticed that he was a little flushed. Looking down, he saw that she had forgotten to feed Hanabi and had left her breast out. She quickly covered herself and attempted to pretend nothing had happened, but the three sets of eyes were staring at her, so that didn't work. Aki turned to her husband for support, but he seemed mildly amused by the situation, but he had to assist her or face her wrath, shudders. The young Namikaze was staring at him when he said, "Naruto. Sama, why are you here this time, and please say it isn't just to say hello." Hashi's eyes started to twitch, and Naruto simply laughed nervously. "That is why you came here, isn't it?" He growled at the boy. Naruto simply replied, "Yep, that is one reason, but the other reason is that I wanted to tell Hinata-chan that my cousin is pregnant and I'm going to be an Onisan." Everyone fell silent upon hearing this, with the exception of Hanabi, who was merely seeking attention and didn't fully comprehend what was happening. To Naruto's delight, Hinata leapt and gave him a hug once things were back to normal. After releasing her grip, Hinata grinned and said, "Naruto-kun, you're going to have a sibling. It's going to be great." Even Hashi smirked when he heard the news, and Aki grinned. Aki grinned as she turned to face Naruto and said, "Naruto-kun, if you would like, maybe you could let me help Kushina through her pregnancy." Naruto then added, "I'm sure cousin would be happy if you helped her, she is always saying good things about you, Aki. Sama." Aki turned her head when she heard Hanabi scream for attention. As he held her, Naruto said, "There, you got our attention, Hanabi-chan, so no more crying, okay?" Hanabi calmed down and grinned, adding, "And in a few months you are going to have a new friend to play with, okay?" As soon as Naruto heard this, Hanabi started squealing in Naruto's arms. Hinata grinned when she saw how skilled Naruto was holding Hanabi. He made it appear effortless and effortless. Hinata blushed as she said, "Naruto-kun, I know that you will be a great father one day." Though Aki saw how well Naruto could care for children, Hinata wasn't the only one who had this thought. "I can't wait for those grandchildren to spoil inner." Aki squealed. As all of this was happening, there was a knock on the door. Hashi turned to enter, and a boy with long brown hair and eyes the same color as Naruto and Hinata appeared. He was a little older than both of them. Hinata rushed to embrace the boy after noticing this, saying, "Neji. Ni-san." The boy, who is now Neji, simply glared down at her and said, "Hinata. Sama, I told you not to hug me." Hinata merely pouted, but "Ne-san." Neji simply ignored her and glared at Naruto, who glared back. Neji simply looked at his uncle and said, "Atu-san wants me to remind you of the meeting, that is all." Hashi nodded, "I will be there soon," and Neji departed. Hashi wanted to end this before anything happened, so he asked Neji to explain why he was here. Upon his departure, Naruto gave Hanabi to Hinata and informed her that he needed to leave. Hinata wanted to object, but she understood that he needed to return home and prepare for the academy. He turned to his friend and said, "Goodbye, Hinata-chan. I hope we are in the same class at the academy." Hinata grinned and replied, "I hope so to Naruto-kun." He then departed to go home and start his studies. Later that evening, the only thought that was going through Naruto's mind as he was finishing another scroll was, "Kami. This is so boring, they're actually expecting us to learn this crap." Naruto was so focused on his rant that he failed to notice his father entering the room. Minato looked down at his son and saw how hard he was studying and detested it. While he was in the academy, Minato recalled that all of this was just as horrible as the evil paperwork. "Naruto, it's time to get some sleep," Minato said, placing his hand on his shoulder. Naruto simply looked at his father and said, "Hello, Atu-san." "Good night, Atu-san," said Naruto as he climbed into his bed. Minato simply grinned at his son and said, "Good night, Naruto," but before he left the room, he turned back to Naruto and asked, "You didn't have anything to drink before you went to bed, did you?" Naruto with a red face and yelled, "Atu-san." As Kushina and Minato prepared for bed in the master bedroom, Kushina smiled and put her hand on her stomach, saying, "I can't wait to show both of you this world we live in, my babies." Despite the Namikaze family's best efforts to block the sun, morning had returned. The babies were almost ready to be born. Regarding our hero Naruto, he was happy to be alive and had a wonderful friendship with Hinata, which even assisted some of the other clan members in seeing past their traditional ways. Even Naruto's cousins appeared to like her, or at least put up with her for a while. Though they kept their feelings to themselves, the elders were not happy to have her in their house. They didn't want to do anything that would cause the village to go to civil war. The information about Namikaze Kushina's second pregnancy was the most significant piece of village rumors. Once the word spread, somehow, a lot of people started acting weird and a little shady around Kushina. Gifts and candy were offered to Kushina and the child, and the Fire Lord's wife even offered to give the family a newborn kitten, which was a very bad idea for obvious reasons. Every day that passed saw a change made to Kushina's body. She almost killed and castrated someone for things like forgetting to take out the trash and not properly chewing their food, but other days it wasn't that bad. To everyone's dismay, Kushina and Minato decided to seal her stomach so that no one could discover the gender of the child or children, as if that weren't enough. That wasn't the most pressing issue, though, because two figures, a man and a woman, were approaching their house from the east gate. 3 whiskers were born on either side of the man's face, and he had green eyes and black hair. Her eyes were white, her body was slim, and she had a bandage covering her forehead, as if to conceal something. The man simply smiled at the village and said, "We are finally home, Emiko." Shan. The woman, who was identified as Emiko, simply smiled at her teammate and said, "Hello, we are home. Ken-kun." The man, Ken, could see that his return was not making her happy. Ken approached his dejected teammate without giving it much thought and put his arms around her. Ken-kun, we can't do this, not so close to the village." Emiko gasped and turned slightly red in the face as a result. Ken ignored her and carried on with his activities, nibbling on her neck and leaving tiny bite marks that caused Emiko to exclaim, "Ken-kun." When Ken heard this, he continued by sticking his hand inside Emiko's shirt and firmly grasping her breast. Emiko gasped more as she felt her large, extremely sensitive breasts, a characteristic of Hyuga women, being played with on her chest. Maybe it runs in their family? Emiko tried again to persuade her teammate to stop, saying, "KK Ken-kun W. We need to stop we." Ken quickly covered Emiko's mouth with his own, kissing her and cutting her off. Emiko was in complete awe as she felt his tongue probe her mouth and reciprocated by doing the same to his. For a long time, the two remained in this position, never leaving each other's faces aside from breathing and immediately returning to investigate the cavern of their mouths. But after a while, they split up and began to breathe heavily and deeply. With tears welling up in her eyes, Emiko gave her teammate a sad glare and asked, "Why?" Ken gave her a serious look and said, "Why? Well, that's a stupid question, Emiko. Shan, and you should be the smart one." Emiko grinned at Ken's joke and walked up to her, putting his arms around her and saying, "Emiko. Shan, you should know this by now, but I love you." Ken continued with his dreams after hearing this, and Emiko grinned, always adoring those 3 words. "Emiko. Shan, I really do love you, and if I could I would do anything to make sure we could have a life," Ken said, drawing from the depths of his heart. Emiko grinned and started to picture life with the man she loved. As Ken continued his dream, Emiko would visualize it. Emiko laughed when she heard Ken dressed like a farmer and attempting to pass as one. "We could settle down, move to a place in the country, maybe I could become a farmer or something." Emiko flushed when Ken went on to say, "Have a clear view of the night sky, and wake up to your beauty every morning." However, Ken soon started to frown, saying, "But there is the fact that our families would never accept a union." Emiko also started to frown, realizing that this was a dark side to this little fairy tale, saying, "They would probably kick me out of the clan. Then would most likely label me a cannibal." Ken sighed. After learning more about this and realizing that Ken's family would act in this manner, Emiko became extremely upset. Since she was a member of the branch family, she was unable to influence anything. For some reason, Ken was grinning as Emiko continued to wallow in her own misery. Ken simply sighed, "Well, I wonder how long it would take the hunter nins to catch us if we ran from the village." "You can't do that, you have a respected place in the village," Emiko said, looking directly at Ken to make sure he was serious based on the smile on his face. Emiko simply stared at him and asked, "Would you really throw all that away just for someone like me?" Ken simply kissed her on the lips and said, "Hi, I would for you, my Emiko. Chan." Emiko did the only thing she could think of that would be appropriate in this situation. She gave him a tight hug and wouldn't let go, wondering in the back of her mind, "Is there a chance we could be together, my Ken-kun?" The Konoha gates, it was so bad that one of the Chunin was asleep and the other was reading an orange book and laughing when he saw 2 figures approaching the gate. The 2 guards were brand new Chunin and were guarding for the first time, expecting some excitement, but they were mistaken because no one had yet arrived. As Ken and Emiko approached the gate, the Chunin with the book saw this and woke his partner by giving him an elbow to the ribs. The 2 of them were stopped by the Chunin, who said, "Halt, state your name and business." Ken said, "Namake Ken, hunter. Nin, returning home from a long recon mission," and Emiko said, "Hyuga Emiko, hunter. Nin, returning home from a long recon mission. While on guard duty, I would also advise you to avoid sleeping and reading trashy books." The 2 of them perspired and said, Hi Hyuga. Sama. The 2 hunter. Nin then started to walk as slowly as they could to the Hokage Tower, looking around to see what had changed since they had left. However, as they were looking, Ken failed to notice Naruto, who was not looking where he was going, and Hinata, who was behind him, until they collided. Ken was unaffected, but Naruto fell on his ass and glared at the man, saying, "Hey, watched where you were going." Ken didn't want to hear this. He was expecting the brat to apologize and say something like, "You're the one who ran into me, you little runt of the litter." Naruto blushed a little at this, which confused Emiko and Hinata, who thought it was a dog thing. Who you calling a runt, you ass-scented bastard?" Naruto yelled. What did you say about my scent, you pissed-scented midget?" Ken's jaw hit the ground, and the two just glared at each other while sparks flew everywhere. Hinata noticed the older woman staring at her, blushed under her gaze, and asked, "Do I know you?" While the two Namikaze members were glaring at each other, the two Hyugas were thinking the same thing. Why do they always have to pick a fight? Emiko turned to look at the girl next to her, noticing that she was a Hyuga like her but that she did not have a seal on her forehead. Emiko knelt down to the girl's level and grinned, "I don't think so, me and that baka over there." She gestured to Ken, which caused Hinata to giggle, saying, "Have been gone a while." Hinata smiled immediately, liking the woman, and asked, "Who are you, if I may ask?" Emiko nodded. "My name is Hyuga Emiko, branch member." At this, Hinata frowned, never liking that title in her family, and seeing no real use for the cursed seal. Emiko realized this and became perplexed, as the girl was clearly a member of the main family, so why did she appear so depressed? Looking at Hinata, Emiko asked, "What's wrong, kid?" Hinata simply stared at the ground and started to twitch her fingers together in a cute way. "You're from the branch family, so do you have it?" Emiko understood what the girl was referring to at this point. "Hey, I have that seal." "Why?" Naruto arrived before Hinata could ask, "What seal are you two talking about?" Following his statement, Ken slapped Naruto in the back of the head and said, "Mind your own business, brat." Emiko then slapped Ken in the same spot, asking, "What if I told you about that?" Ken rubbed his head and, like a child, said, "Not to." The children then giggled at the adult display. Naruto asked, "So what this seal?" after the pain in the back of Ken's head had subsided. Hearing this, Hinata explained everything. "It began with our clan's founder, who had twins with our vampire characteristics and a pair of white eyes each. These two twins were named Yang and Hyuga Yin. Although they had different views about typical people, the two grew up with respect for one another. Yang desired to live in harmony and coexistence with people. But to Yin, people were either food or slaves. Shortly afterward, there were issues between the two, which eventually resulted in a death due to duel. Even though it was a duel to the death, Yang was unable to bring himself to kill his brother, and he ended up winning the duel after many days. Yang, however, made a seal known as the caged bird seal because he knew he couldn't let Yin go free. The seal was intended to restrain the Yin, reduce his strength, and destroy his eyes in the event of an enemy attack. As the years passed and each twin had a family, Yang continued to train them, improving our family's methods. Despite doing something similar and raising a family, Yin still desired greater authority and retribution for his loss. Yang could see that things had gotten out of control after Yin quickly instilled his greed in his kids. Yang therefore made all of Yin's children and any future children wear the seal and act as guardians of what he now referred to as the main family in order to keep the family from going to war. The conflict with the Lycans began after that, and they established a home in Konoha. That's how things have been for the entire time. After taking a deep breath, Hinata noticed that everyone was staring at her with a slack jaw. She also started to get red at being the center of attention, especially when Naruto was staring at her with wide eyes. He ran up to her and slapped her in the face, saying, "Wow, Hinata-chan, you can remember everything about your family's past, you're so smart and incredible." At the sound of this, Hinata's face turned bright red, and she mentally yelled, "Naruto-kun thinks I'm smart and incredible." Thinking she was sick, Naruto checked her forehead. Hinata fainted as a result of this brief physical contact, knocking Naruto to the ground. Many people gathered to observe because they were interested in what was happening in the market. They discovered two clan heirs in the middle of the road, lying on top of one another. When Ken saw this, he had to joke, "Do you two want to go somewhere private and finish what you're doing?" Naruto became enraged and said, "I swear kids these days have to know sham." Emiko quickly silenced Ken by giving him another slap on the head, this time with the muttered phrase, "Arrow. Baka." As all of this was happening, Hinata was beginning to awaken and noticed she was sitting on something very cozy. When she opened her eyes, she discovered that she was lying on Naruto's chest. "This isn't what it looks like," was Naruto's reaction when he saw that Hinata was awake and that she was staring at him with some redness as well. Hinata then passed out. I thought she was over this. Kami. Her scent is nice, Naruto sighed. After a while, Hinata became conscious once more. She was able to quickly remove the red flush from her face and started introducing herself and Naruto, saying, I'm Hyuga Hinata. Before pointing to Naruto and saying, and he is Namikaze Naruto, my best friend. When Ken and Emiko heard those words, they instantly froze. They quickly realized who they were when Ken said, You're the heirs to both of our clans. Naruto then started to rub both of his ears, asking, Did you have to shout Baka? How could you two be friends if you're from the Namikaze and Hyuga clan? Emiko asked, perplexed. Naruto simply rolled his eyes and said, You sound like the elders who constantly talk about how we should keep our distance from one another. When Naruto said, Of course they usually close their eye for some reason while explaining this and then we run off, Hinata nodded, agreeing with him because she had done the same thing. Both Emiko and Ken considered it, and when they were young, the elders did the same thing. Ken simply shrugged his shoulders and said, Must be an old fart thing. At this, Naruto started laughing, and Hinata giggled a little while Emiko slapped Ken in the back of the head once more. Naruto and Hinata bid farewell and sprinted off to their destination once more after everything had subsided. Following their departure, Ken grinned at what he saw, which perplexed Emiko. What are you so happy about? I see hope that one day our clans will be at peace with one another when I look at those two, Ken said, glancing at her. Emiko couldn't help but smile at the prospect of spending time with her beloved. Tower of Hokage Kushina was on Minato's lap, smiling at her mate as he rubbed her stomach, feeling the pups moving around inside her. While they were doing this, they were unaware that two people had entered the office, and Minato Namikaze, also known as Kage Bushin no Jutsu, had just finished his paperwork at the tower. He had managed to finish his paperwork in the same hour that his wife came by to relieve him of some stress. Kushina leapt from Minato's lap upon hearing this and suppressed her blush upon recognizing a familiar face. Ken? When Kushina asked, Ken simply smiled and said, Yeah, it's me, Kushina. Obaken, got to say you've gotten pretty fat. Then, she remembered she was in front of the Ken clan leader, and she said, Minato. Sama, I apologize for. She didn't get a chance to finish, though, as Minato waved her away, saying, There is no need to apologize, Emiko. Sama. Even if your teammate is a baka, it can't help. Hey, Ken yelled. Ken and Emiko both stood up straight and spoke simultaneously, Hokage. Sama, Namikaze Ken reporting. And Hyuga Emiko reporting. Minato put on a serious expression as he said, Report. Ken began by saying, Our mission to establish trade and setting up proper spy networks in villages was a success. Emiko then said, The networks were set up in villages near Iwagakure no Sato and other hostile countries. Minato grinned. Well, I'm glad that everything worked out well and that the side mission was also a success. Minato was looking forward to the news of the new spy network being set up and was pleased to see how close these two had become. When Ken and Emiko heard this, they became confused and Emiko asked, Side mission, what are you talking about, Hokage? Sama. Minato smiled evilly and said, There was a side mission placed on this mission as well. It was to see how someone from the Hyuga clan and the Namikaze clan could work together on a long-term mission. Both Ken and Emiko's mouths hit the ground, and Kushina simply grinned, saying, Now you two, if you have to open your mouths, it should only be to eat, drink, breathe, or have someone explore it with their tongue. The two shinobi turned red, and Ken yelled in embarrassment, Kushina. Obaken. Although Minato was aware of Kushina's intentions, she chose to act foolish because she rarely had the opportunity to make fun of young couples. Why Kushina? Shan, what are you talking about? Playing the part, Minato said. Why Minato, if you get close enough you can smell their scents all over each other along with the scent of lust as well. Both Ken and Emiko blushed deeply red because it was true, and Kushina continued to act innocent. Once Minato had stopped laughing at the situation of the two lovers, he turned to Emiko and said, Emiko-san, I would like to ask you something and as your Hokage I expect you to answer me honestly, understand? Emiko nodded her head and said, Hi, Hokage. Sama. Somehow, knowing that this would lead to trouble later, Minato took a deep breath and simply stared at Emiko, asking, Emiko-san, are you in love with Ken? Emiko gasped and flushed at the sound of this, wanting to deny it to avoid trouble with Ken and herself, but if she lied to the Hokage, it would be worse and Ken would be hurt, and that was the last thing she wanted. With no other choice, Emiko chose to accept her punishment, whatever it might be. After turning back to Minato, Emiko grinned and said, Hi, Hokage. Sama, I am in love with Ken. Minato grinned as well and turned to face Ken, but Ken interrupted, saying, Hi, I love Emiko. Chan hell I ask for her hand if it wasn't for this feud between our family. Emiko grinned at her lover's words and muttered, Ken.kun. He looked at both Ken and Emiko and said, while I am happy you two, this will go well with the elder who will look at this as something improper and will be against it. When Ken heard this, he became enraged and asked, how the hell is being love each other improper? Minato simply sighed and said, it isn't, but the elders from either family won't see it that way. Knowing all of this, Emiko sighed, so what can we do, Hokage? Sama. When Ken yelled, so what the fuck do we do then? Minato simply shook his head back and forth, saying, there really is nothing we can do even with my and Hashi's support along with our wives' support that still wouldn't be enough to let the elders allow such a relationship. Minato simply looked at his nephew and said, as of right now nothing. Ken and Emiko were both staring at the ground in disappointment until they noticed Minato's smile, which said, but social interactions, training, and two friends getting some lunch shouldn't count as anything too serious by elders. Ken simply laughed at the thought, enjoying the fact that his uncle was a practical joker, while Emiko was glad she could spend time with Ken and not have to lie to her family, but she couldn't help but think, why am I doing all this for you two? Minato concluded for her, and Emiko simply nodded her head. I personally have to quarrel with any of the Hyuga and would like to see this dispute between our clans end, Minato said, smiling warmly and reassuringly. I just do my best to prevent things from getting out of control because I don't see that happening anytime soon. Emiko grinned at this, admiring the man in front of her. He's so much like Ken.kun, always wanting to help others with even thinking of himself. It must run in the family, Emiko thought to herself. Plus, my son's best friend is a Hyuga, so it wouldn't be fair to him if I told him to stay away without a good reason. Minato simply looked at his mate in concern, asking, Kushina. Chan are you okay? Kushina simply stared at her mate, Minato.kun. I think my water just broke. Kushina was getting bored and was just standing around doing nothing. Well, now that we have everything settled, why don't you go and grab something to eat? She said, but she didn't finish her sentence. Everyone turned to see the water surrounding Kushina's feet after hearing these words, and Ken started to panic, saying, holy shit, what do we do? Get a doctor. Does anyone know CPR? Emiko grabbed Ken by the collar of his shirt as he was in a panic, saying, WILL. Smack. You. Smack. Stop. Smack. Shouting, smack. You. Smack. Baka. Smack. After Emiko had finished slapping Ken, she gasped for air and said, you better now. Hi. Ken said, unable to say anything more, and noticed something. Where did they go? Emiko glanced around the office and saw that both Minato and Kushina had left, both of them sweating. Minato and Kushina were traveling across the village in what seemed like a flash of light as Minato carried his wife in his arm. He looked down at her and said, those two have a bright future ahead of them, right, Kushina? Chan. Kushina retorted by slapping Minato in the face and saying, stop fucking talking and pick up the pace, you bastard. Hell, it's your fault I'm in this much fucking pain, now get me to a fucking doctor, you blonde-hair-dyed bastard. Minato simply sighed and said, hi, dear, thinking, my hair isn't dyed. Park Konoha. After completing a small picnic, Hinata and Naruto were lounging in the park at Konoha's park beneath one of the many trees. Naruto lay on Hinata's lap with his head resting on it while she rubbed the whisker lines on his face, which were his weak spot. Hinata had her back to the tree. The two did this as frequently as they could, and Naruto thought he was in heaven when he got to have Hinata's gentle hands stroke his markings and breathe in her aroma. Hinata also thought they were adorable and loved how Naruto would simply pour at the slightest mark. Naruto barely opened his eyes enough to see a burst of yellow light in the sky while they were doing this. Naruto.kun, what is that? Hinata asked, noticing the same thing. Naruto looked up at her and said, I'm not sure, Hinata. Chan, I think that's the Hiraishin no Jutsu Myoto-san prized jutsu. Hinata simply blinked slightly in surprise at having just seen one of the most potent jutsu ever made in the village. As she was thinking, she didn't notice the presence next to her. That's right, Naruto.kun. Both children turned to look at the person, and Hinata whispered, Ka-san. Aki was grinning and holding Hanabi when she said, well, aren't you two having fun? They both turned red, rose off the ground, and turned to face Aki with flushed faces. So Aki. Sama, why are you here and hello to you, Hanabi. Chan. Naruto grinned and rubbed the back of his head. Aki grinned at the boy's constant politeness, and Hanabi simply tried her best to approach him. Naruto grinned as the group began their journey to the hospital after Aki grinned at the boy and said, "Well, as you could see by the flash of light, your sibling will be born soon and I wanted to get you before I go there." Hospital in Konoha. Naruto asked Aki, "Sama, are you sure my Ka-san is here?" As the group arrived at the hospital, Aki nodded her head and said, "Hi, Naruto, I am sure your mother is here." He then yelled, "Tell that fucking useless doctor to stop fucking around and help me, damn it." Aki then departed to assist Kushina. Naruto found a chair in the lobby after Aki left and sat there while he waited for any updates on Ka-san. He soon saw that Hinata was seated next to him, holding Hanabi. He grinned at his friend, saying, "Hinata-chan, you don't have to stick around, you know." Hinata simply grinned back, saying, "You were with me the whole time Hanabi was born, so it is only right that I'm with you in all this, Naruto-kun." For some reason, Naruto felt a weird warm sensation in his chest, but he chose to ignore it because Hanabi was vying for attention. Hanabi simply laughed for no apparent reason when Naruto turned to face the small baby and said, "And you're here as well, Hanabi-chan, and soon you will have a new friend to play with like I promised." After a few hours, Hanabi had dozed off, and Naruto and Hinata continued to wait in the lobby with no indication that anything was happening. Naruto saw his father standing in front of him as the two were ready to go to sleep. "Auto-san?" he asked. After waking Hinata and telling her the same thing, Naruto followed Minato's instructions with a smile. The trio proceeded down the corridors until they reached a room where they saw a very contented but worn-out Kushina holding not one, but two infants. "Ka-san, are you okay, and where the baby?" Naruto asked her as he approached his Ka-san. Naruto blinked and appeared perplexed as to why there were babies, but Kushina simply grinned at her firstborn and said, "I'm fine, Naruto-kun, and the babies are right here." When Kushina saw her son's bewilderment, she simply laughed and turned to face the two babies. "My little pups, this is your Oni-san Naruto," she said, and the two infants simply stared at their brother and grew weary of reaching out to him. Even though he was pleased to be an Oni-san, Naruto was still perplexed by one thing. "Ka-san, why are there two babies?" Minato simply smiled and put a hand on his shoulder, saying, "Naruto, sometimes more than one baby can be born. They're called twins." Naruto simply nodded at his father before turning to face Hinata and requesting that she come over. Hinata grinned as she observed the two kids' adorable appearance. The twins simply glanced at Hanabi and Hinata, immediately comparing them. One of the red-haired twins attempted to approach Hinata in the same way that she had Naruto, but the other twin, a boy with blonde hair, was observing Hanabi with some interest. As Hinata approached the two, Hanabi's hand extended to the boy, who grasped it and held onto it. Hanabi grinned broadly at this and grew weary of approaching him. When Minato and Kushina saw this, they couldn't help but laugh because the two, despite being infants, were already close and the baby girl appeared to already look up to Hinata. Once all of this was over, Naruto asked his parents what their names were. Minato said, "The boy's name is Kim as in gold." Kushina said, "The girl's name is Akaka as in red." Both parents grinned and simply pondered what lay ahead. Both Kim and Akaka had been born some time ago, and Naruto and Hinata were doing well in school, maintaining their level so they wouldn't fail or be perceived as too strong. At the moment, Naruto was 11 years old, and Hinata was 10. And they had 1 year left in the academy before they could become ninja. They weren't the only ones getting better. After learning to walk, Hanabi began training with her sister and, although at first she was hardly able to do anything, she was picking things up quickly and making great progress for her age. She wanted to be a shinobi for a number of reasons, including wanting to be on par with her sister, becoming a great kunoichi, and impressing someone. There was a morning ritual of two specific twins fighting over the bathroom at the Namikaze family home. After waiting for her brother to get out of the shower again for 2 hours, with her arms wrapped around her chest and tapping her foot, Akaka lost it and yelled, "Hey pretty boy, there are other peopleswho need to bath danm it." She continued to bang on the bathroom door. "Can't she learn to be a little patient?" Kim sighed as he washed his face in the bathroom to make sure he was reasonably clean. Kim then smiled at his sibling and said, "Ohayo sister." As she entered the bathroom, Akaka simply glared at him and said, "About time." Before closing the door, Akaka turned back to her brother and said, "Honestly brother, if it weren't for your crush on Hanabi-chan, I swear you were gay." Kim blushed and pleaded, "Sister please," while Akaka rolled her eyes at how pitiful he was. Although they were twins, Kim and Akaka had different personalities. Akaka was like her mother at that age, short-tempered, rude, foul-mouthed, always looking for a fight, and never showed respect to anyone, whereas Kim was kind, selfless, understanding, respectful, and intelligent. Their only personal similarity was that they both never abandoned someone in need or gave up on an enemy. Kim went to the dining room to join the rest of his family for breakfast while Akaka was taking a shower. When Kim entered, he bowed to them and said, "Ohayo everyone." At this, everyone turned to smile at Kim, and Kim sat down to eat his breakfast slowly and properly. After 25 minutes, Akaka opened the sliding door, greeted her family with, "Yo," sat down next to her brother, and started to eat her breakfast. Kim, who was flushed, looked at his sister and thought, "I have to be adopted." He shook his head and reached for one of the rice balls, but Akaka grabbed it and devoured it in 2 seconds. Kim gave his sister a small glare and said, "Sister, I was going to eat that." Akaka simply stared at him. "You didn't need it, you would only get fatter." Kim blushed, "I'm not fat." Before Akaka could say anything more, she felt a hand on her shoulder and heard the words, "It's not nice to make fun of your brother, is it Imoudo? Chan?" The twins turned to see Naruto grinning and jumped on him, saying, "Ni-san." It was funny because, of all the people in the clan, Naruto was the only one who could really control both Kim and Akaka, and they both held him in high regard. Following their separation, Naruto turned to face his siblings. He said to Akaka, "Akaka-chan, you know shouldn't make fun of your brother because he the non-aggressive type." Akaka nodded, "Hi Ni-san." Naruto then turned to Kim, saying, "Kim-kun, you really need to put up more of a fight and not let other people walk all over you, got it?" Kim nodded his head in agreement. When Naruto said to his siblings, "Okay, you two, one last thing, what's the most important thing for a shinobi?" The twins grinned and said, "To protect the ones that are precious to us." Naruto ruffled both of their hair and grinned proudly, saying, "That's right now, keep that in mind, and you will go far." The twins simply grinned, "Hi, Ni-san." Akaka grinned and yelled, "All right," while Kim simply grinned and blushed, "Wonderful." Naruto then took a seat at the table and said, "Okay, a few bowls of extra beef ramen and then off to see Hinata-chan and Hanabi-chan." Namikaze Jun was one of the Namikaze members who wasn't looking forward to this, while the younger members were. Jun scowled at Naruto and said, "This must end." Naruto asked, "Is something wrong, Oji-san?" Jun simply glared at Naruto and said, "All this time that has been wasted on this Hyuga and her family must come to an immediate end." Given that Jun was one of the more traditional Namikaze members and adamant that the long-standing conflict between the two clans was required to establish who was superior, even in the event that both clans were exterminated, Naruto could see where this was headed. To make matters worse, he was the father of both Haru and, regrettably, Ken. "I don't see why I should end my friendship with Hinata-chan Oji-san," Naruto said, continuing to glare at his uncle. "In my opinion, there is nothing wrong with it, and aside from your own narrow-mindedness, you haven't yet offered your opinion any real substance." After hearing all of this, Jun would grit his teeth and excuse himself, but not before glancing at Naruto, who did nothing but say, "The more you're around, the more likely you are to lose your title as this clan's heir, and walk out." While he cared about being the next in line to become the clan head for the Namikaze, Naruto ignored his uncle's threats and simply rolled his eyes when he heard them. He looked at his siblings as they were eating and grinned, saying that they were the reason he did these things, wanting to improve everyone's lives and leave the next generation peaceful rather than hateful. In order to meet up with their two favorite Hyugas, the three Namikaze started walking to one of the many training fields after breakfast. The two boys were excited to see their Hinata and Hanabi, while Akaka was in a good mood to train but not as excited as the boys. The field of random training, the two sisters were soon taking a brief break, breathing heavily and resting on the ground as they waited for the Namikaze family at the training fields. Hinata was looking up at the sky, wondering when Naruto would arrive, while Hanabi was on the ground, trying to catch her breath. With her sister in the trap, Hanabi continued, "Oh please, like you wouldn't want Naruto here with you all alone." Hinata blushed at this, saying, "I don't know W. What why? You're talking about Hanabi-chan." Hanabi saw a broad smile on her sister's face and said, "Can't wait to see Naruto-kun can you ne-chan." Hinata was currently flushed with shame because of what her sister was saying, and it was also true. Throughout her time with Naruto, her feelings for him changed over time. Initially, she thought of him as her best friend and a sort of brother, but as time passed, she began to feel something different, which led to a small but eventually intense crush on the blonde. She still didn't understand what she was feeling, and she even asked her mother, but all she ever did was laugh and say, "To be young again," which didn't really help her at all. Hanabi went on, observing that Hinata would not resist. I bet you want to be all alone with him while he puts his arms around you and gives you little kisses down your neck. You simply stand there groaning his name as he does all of this, saying, "Oh Naruto-kun. Please kiss me Naruto-kun. Please touch me right." Hanabi, said the girl, who froze when she saw Hinata with a glare full of evil intent and a lot of killer intent. Her sister rarely yelled. Hanabi just stared at her sister in confusion and terror, saying, "It was in these orange books that I found in Sans and Odo-san's room." Hinata, on the other hand, was filled with rage and asked, "Where on earth did you learn to talk like that? San and Odo-san have those books and Hanabi found them." "Better hide mine better," Hinata said, blushing as her jaw almost hit the floor. Hanabi simply sat there perplexed. As soon as the blush subsided, Hinata put on a serious expression and said, "Hanabi, you shouldn't be going through other people's belongings because you might regret it one day." Hanabi tilted her head in confusion at her sister's words. "What do you mean Oni-chan?" Hinata assumed a contemplative stance and said, "Well, you might be searching through our parents' bedroom and grabbing random items like Odo-san's boxers." Hanabi grew pale and shivered. Hanabi simply nodded as Hinata noted this. "Exactly, and don't even think of going into my room." "Oi Hinata-chan, Hanabi-chan," was said, and both Hyuga girls turned to see their favorite blonde lichen. "Hey Hinata-chan, Hanabi-chan." Naruto greeted the three Namikaze members, and Hinata waved and grinned at her friend, saying, "Ohayo Naruto-kun, Kim-kun, Akaka-chan." Kim blushes when she sees Hanabi. "Ohayo Hinata-chan, Hanabi-chan." Akaka was too preoccupied with sticking her finger in her ear to respond much at first, just saying, "Yo." The kids worked out in the morning by doing push-ups, tree climbing, well, for Naruto and Hinata, laps around the field, and other exercises. The kids decided to take a break after training for about an hour. The older kids were a little exhausted, while the younger ones were gasping for air on the ground. They had been doing this kind of training for a lot longer, so it wasn't a problem. They decided to take a lunch break after everyone had recovered and realized it was getting close to noon. Naruto ate extra ramen made with beef and pork. It was Hinata's cinnamon buns. Akaka was consuming a large amount of beef jerky. Dango was being eaten by Hanabi. Boken habanero was being consumed by Kim. When Kim noticed Hanabi eating another piece of dango, he pulled out a homemade creation and said, "Hey Hanabi-chan." As he handed Kim a rice ball, Hanabi, who had just swallowed another piece of dango, glanced at her. Kim smiled and said, "I made them this morning. I hope you like them," but she was actually perspiring profusely. Upon biting into one of the rice balls, Hanabi's eyes widened and she exclaimed, "This is incredible Kim-kun, with brilliant eyes." Kim's heart ached when she heard Hanabi's response to the words. "You are really think so Hanabi-chan?" Kim blushed at Hanabi's words but smiled shyly as she nodded her head and said, "Of course Kim-kun, this is great, you have real talent." Hanabi couldn't stop staring at Kim when he smiled. She loved it when he smiled, but she was more affected by the color of his eyes than anything else. His hair was as dazzling and spiky as a golden field, and they resembled a deep ocean. As she drew nearer to him, she couldn't resist. Kim noticed that Hanabi was experiencing the same issue and kept looking into his eyes, which resembled the moon, which he loved to see at night. Her long black hair, which he adored for the way it blew in the wind, and her creamy white skin gave Hanabi the appearance of a goddess. Since he can remember, he has always enjoyed being around Hanabi because her presence always made his heart race and gave him an odd feeling in his stomach. For some reason, he felt the urge to lean into her even as he thought about her. The two drew closer and closer until their lips were almost touching and their faces were only inches apart. Someone asked, "Do you two want to be alone?" And Kim and Hanabi turned to see Akaka smiling, Hinata, and Naruto giving his sibling the thumbs up. As a result, Kim and Hanabi both became very angry. As she looked at her brother, Akaka noticed one of her evil sibling moments, hee, and said, "So when's the wedding? Or were you planning to elope him?" Kim's jaw dropped to the floor, and his face brightened redder. The idea of marrying Kim someday made Hanabi smile even though she flushed just as much. Fortunately, Kami answered Kim's questions about whether there was a godlike entity that could save him from this humiliation. A mature wolf with black fur and facial scars approached the small group. Naruto grinned and said, "Hello Zev. Sama." Zev, the wolf, simply stared at Naruto gravely and said, "Your father has called you to the tower pup." Naruto frowned at being referred to as a pup, while Hinata merely laughed. But when she saw Zev growling and glaring at her, she stopped. Knowing that only a small percentage of the Namikaze clan's human members liked her, Hinata started to feel anxious. However, she was informed by the clan's real wolves that they had absolutely no faith in her. As one of the oldest members of the Namikaze clan, Zev continued to glare at Hinata, expressing his lack of trust in this or any Hyuga. Zev, on the other hand, had never harbored any serious animosities toward the Hyugas which is why he consistently favored a quiet conflict between the two over a full-scale conflict. He didn't, however, trust any of them, particularly this girl. Hinata made the decision to try to win Zev over if at all possible because she could almost feel the mistrust radiating from him. Looking at the wolf, Hinata saw that he was very old and had been through a lot of battles, but he also had a very clean and well-maintained coat. Hinata looked at Zev. "Your coat is very nice, Zev. Sama, it must take a lot of work to keep it like that." Everyone turned to face Hinata when they heard this, as it was unusual for her to act so bravely. Hinata nodded in agreement as Zev continued. "You are also one of few who actually acknowledge how difficult it is, unlike some pups." Zev had been staring at Hinata when he suddenly broke into a broad smile. "Why, thank you, Hyuga. Sama, you have no idea how difficult keeping my coat like this is." The Namikaze family collapsed upon witnessing this. Zev had never behaved in such a manner toward anyone, not even Minato, the clan leader, as far as they could all recall. To be honest, it was a little unsettling to see Zev in this state, but Hinata had completed it without any issues in less than a few seconds. Hinata was doing this while the others were still in shock. As Zev's wolf ears twitched every few seconds, Hinata sat staring at them. Without giving it a second thought, Hinata reached out and started massaging Zev's ears, assuming nothing bad would happen. The Namikaze family's jaws had fallen deeper into the ground when they saw what Hinata was doing. They were witnessing the unthinkable. Zev, the eldest wolf in the Namikaze family, who had endured numerous conflicts and battles and lacked empathy or tolerance for any Hyuga. However, he was acting like a puppy and getting his ears scratched, to Hinata, no less. During this time, Naruto attempted to break what he believed to be a genjutsu, only to discover that it was actually Zev. Additionally, he started to feel a little resentful of Zev for having his ears scratched by Hinata's delicate hands, saying, "That's reserved for me, damn it." To get Zev's attention, Naruto coughed. "If you're done, Zev, can we get to the tower already?" he asked, crossing his arms over his chest. Akaka simply smirked evilly at his behavior and asked, "Is something wrong? Nei-san? Are you jealous?" in a voice that sounded phony. Knowing what would happen, Kim simply retreated, and Hanabi followed suit. After hearing Akaka's words, Naruto clenched his fist and leapt forward to strike his target in the back of the head. Akaka gave a little glare and yelled in pain, "What was that for, jerk?" But Naruto didn't appear to hear. When Kim saw this, he also chose to voice his opinion, saying in a sing-tone voice, "You should have known better, sister." Both Kim and Hanabi blushed when Akaka glared at her brother and said, "Oh, just shut up and go play kissy face with Hanabi-chan." He continued to glare at Zev while he was with Naruto. He continued to clench his now bleeding hand while trying to remain composed. Additionally, he had to control his transformation so he wouldn't rip Zev to pieces. He decided that enough was enough when he noticed Hinata beginning to giggle, and he approached the two and said, "We need to be at the tower, let's go now." Hinata was a little taken aback when she heard Naruto yelling because she could see he was a little irritated and furious. However, Naruto only replied, "No, everything's fine, can we just go already?" Hinata was perplexed, saying, "I.ISS. Something wrong in Naruto.kun." After all these years, Hinata had never heard Naruto yell so specifically at her that it left her stunned. Both Hanabi and the twins were equally shocked by this, as they had never witnessed Naruto acting in such a manner, particularly toward Hinata. It resembled an apocalyptic sign. To avoid upsetting him further, Hinata got up and said, G. Gomen Naruto.kun iid.dd. D. Didn't mean T.to upset you. However, this didn't help, as Naruto simply glared at her, saying, "I'm not upset, I just want to fucking get going, alright." He then grabbed her hand painfully and pulled her roughly. When they saw how Naruto was treating Hinata, everyone was speechless. The twins were at a loss for what to do because their affectionate Ni-san had never behaved in such a manner. Hanabi, who loved Naruto like a brother but didn't want him to harm Hinata, was also unsure of what to do. Zev was also baffled because he knew that Hinata and Naruto were best friends, almost like mates. However, he appeared to be very offended by her attention, saying, "It must be that time of year." Near the Hokage Tower in the center of the village. As Naruto approached the Hokage Tower, he continued to drag Hinata while observing that she was a little slower. Hinata's pace eventually irritated Naruto, who turned to confront her. With a severe expression on his face, he yelled, "What's up with you? We have to get to the tower, so stop playing around and hurry up already." Hinata made every effort to speak, but her words were only faint murmurs. Angry, Naruto tightened his hold on her hand and said, "Whatever you're going to say it already because you're really starting to piss me off, Yubaka." Hinata finally expressed her frustration in a hurt voice, saying, "You're hurting my hand." Naruto then snapped out of whatever was holding him and released her hand, noticing that it was slightly bruised. When Naruto saw the bruise, he blinked and thought, "Did I do that? Did I hurt Hinata? Chan?" Just as he opened his mouth to speak, Hinata slapped him. He had been knocked to the ground by the force of the blow. He felt where the Hinata had slapped him and turned to face her, who was crying and had a sad, hurt expression on her face as she yelled, "Namikaze, you jerk." At the moment, Naruto's only reaction to those words was that of a knife to the heart. Naruto wanted to say something, but Hinata was already fleeing before he could finish. Before he could say anything, Zev said, "What your father needs to talk to you about is important, and if you go after her now it will only make things worse." Naruto was about to pursue her when he heard Zev say, "Naruto, stop." Naruto paused and turned to face the elder wolf, saying, "It's best you leave her alone for now." Naruto agreed after learning that he could worsen the situation. After a moment of searching, he saw that Hanabi and his siblings were standing there, a little scared of him. He felt ill when he saw the terrified expressions in their eyes. When he realized what he had done, he turned to face the kids and begged them to go after Hinata. "Chan and make sure she is okay." Each child nodded and followed Hinata's trail. Household Hyuga with Hinata, Neji, Tenten, Lee, and their new teammates were having green tea and getting to know one another at the Hyuga residence. But since Tenten's family ran the largest gun store in the community, Tenten and Neji were already well acquainted. In contrast, Lee appeared to get along with the other two despite being different. They heard the compound's front door open as they were conversing. Neji grinned slightly, saying, "Hinata Sama must be home." Tenten grinned, saying, "Great, I haven't seen her in a while, and she can meet Lee." Tenten got up to greet her, saying, "Hey Hinata," as Hinata bumped into her. When Hinata realized who it was, she started to apologize, saying, G. Gomen TT. T. Tenten. San IW. Wasn't W. Watching W. Were I W. Was G. Going. Neji and Tenten were both worried about the poor girl, crying and holding a burse on her hand. Despite belonging to the branch family and detesting most of the main family, Neji was unable to hate Hinata and felt great concern for her. Tenten was also worried because she had adopted an older sister role toward Hinata after getting to know Neji, and she was afraid of her in this state. When Neji approached the young Hyuga, he asked calmly, "Hinata Sama, did something happen to you today?" Hinata nodded her head, but she was still unable to come up with a response. Neji continued to ask, "Did someone hurt you, Hinata Sama?" And Hinata nodded her head once more. Does this have something to do with that lichen? Neji recalled earlier today when she had mentioned that she needed to meet someone. Tenten knew trouble was on the way, saying that it's either something about fate this or evil lichens that, and he knows bad-mouthing Naruto will only make things worse. To her surprise, however, Hinata simply nodded and agreed with Neji's statement. When Neji saw his response, he became furious and said, "What did that animal do to Hinata Sama? Did he hurt you? Did he try anything indecent, and did he touch you in any way?" Tenten shoved him aside before he could continue, saying, "Why don't you let her answer first, Neji?" Tenten turned to face the sobbing girl and said, "Hinata Chan, please tell me what happened." Hinata turned to Tenten and said, "Naruto he hates me," and then she ran straight past Tenten and into her room. After hearing Hinata's response, Tenten simply stood there, perplexed, thinking, Naruto hate Hinata, that's not even possible. Tenten barely missed Hanabi's "Out of the way, Mousy," before dogged Akaka's "Please excuse me," and Kim's "Excuse me," as she stood there, wondering what was going on. Tenten wondered what was going on as she followed the children down the hallway until she saw all three of them standing outside Hinata's room once more, whispering to one another, "So who goes in?" He held her hand in an attempt to console her as they all glanced at one another, trying to decide who should enter. Hanabi would have, but she was too scared that she would make matters worse, and Kim could see how distressed she was. When the children looked up to see Ten standing over them, Ten said, "Maybe I can help." Hanabi smiled at the sight of Ten and said, "Chan, could you please help Hinata?" "Nay, Chan. We don't know what to do." Ten nodded when he heard the young girls ask, "I'll see what I can do, Hanabi. Chan." Ten took a deep breath and walked into Hinata's room, expecting to feel warm and happy, but instead she felt sad and hurt. On the bed, Ten saw Hinata sobbing into one of her pillows while lying face down. Ten sat down on the bed and tried to soothe the young girl by massaging her back. When Hinata felt something on her back, she turned to see Ten sitting next to her. Knowing how obstinate the girl was, Hinata would have asked her to leave. When she was able to speak again, she turned to face the older girl and asked, "Could you leave me alone?" The girl merely stared at her and smirked, "Nope, can't do that." Ten responded in the hopes that it would help lighten the mood, but Hinata simply fell deeper into her depression and Ten simply sighed. Crap, that didn't help. Ten sat wondering what she could do to help, but nothing came to mind, so she tried asking directly, "What happened, Hinata? Chan?" Hinata looked at Ten, who, to be honest, had a beseeching expression in her eyes, and she started to explain, "Hanabi and I went to meet Naruto and siblings in one of the training fields." As Ten listened to the entire story, she couldn't help but smile at the young girl's development as a kunoichi and sink her teeth into the situation involving Hanabi and Naruto's brother Kim. Figures they would fall for each other. She told her about Zev and how she scratched his ears, and Ten began to see the picture upon hearing this. Hinata then went on to explain how Naruto became enraged with her and, to Ten's surprise, she slapped him, and Ten scowled at this. Ten grinned after learning the entire story because there weren't many Namikaze clan members in her academy class, and Hinata mistook the smile for amusement, saying, "It's not funny, Ten-san, the person I care about the most hates me." When Ten heard this, she blushed and said, M.M.M.M.M.M.M.E and Neji are just friends and teammates, nothing more. Hinata simply gave a look that said, "Yeah, right. How would you like it if it was you and Neji? Ni.san like this?" Ten started to explain why she was laughing after she had recovered from her blush. "Hinata, the reason I was laughing was because I met some of the Namikaze members and know why Naruto acted that way." Hinata's eyes widened at this. "Why?" Ten grinned when the girl pleaded, "It wasn't you, Hinata. Chan. It was just that members of the Namikaze tend to get jealous really easily." Hinata blinked and gave a perplexed expression, asking, "Why would Naruto-kun be jealous?" Looking at Hinata's face, Ten simply sighed as he heard her bewilderment. Male Namikaze members tend to get a little violent when their mates focus on other males. Hinata. Chan, Naruto was jealous because you were being so close to another male and it wasn't him. Ten smirked evilly and said, "Not yet anyway." Hinata blushed worse when she said, B. But Naruto and I are just F. Friends, I'm N. Not his mate. She whispered, "Hi, not yet. So I should be expecting some grandchildren then." A voice said from the doorway, and when Hinata turned to look where the voice came from, she saw her mother and Kushina standing there. The fact that Kushina was present made Hinata blush even more red when her mother caught her, but she was disturbed when she asked, Kushina. Sama, why are you here?" Kushina simply grinned and said, "Well, I heard what happened, and Aki and I decided that it was time for you and Naruto to have a little talk." After hearing all of this, Hinata thought, "Why me?" She wanted to flee, but she knew Ten and Kushina would stop her. But something else bothered her. Why is Kushina Sama here for this? Kushina simply grinned evilly and said, "Your mother and Ten are going to explain the difference in men and women, while I on the other hand am going to explain the difference of like and men to you." Tower of Hokage with Naruto waited for a moment outside his father's office before he entered and spoke with him. But as he waited, he kept thinking about everything he had done to Hinata, which made him feel ill. He had been trying to figure out what had happened to make him act that way the entire time. It all began when he noticed Hinata simply massaging Zev's ears. He was infuriated that she would do that to someone other than him. At this point, an idea struck him, and he started to reflect deeply. It was almost as if he was jealous, which is why he was so upset that Hinata was giving someone more attention than himself. Then it dawned on him. Was I envious? After some time had passed, Naruto finally heard his father calling to him while he was thinking about these things, and he looked up to say, "Hi, Oto-san." Naruto flinched as his father continued. Because of this, the Hyuga clan elders may use this as an excuse to keep you two away from each other. Minato gave his son a dejected expression and said, Naruto, I always feared this day would come and I wished I got to you before this incident with Hinata happened. Naruto felt sick to his stomach as the idea of never seeing Hinata again crossed his mind. Minato touched his son's shoulder and said, there is nothing to say, Naruto, you're changing and becoming a man, and with it your body is changing as well. Naruto wanted to say something, but the words simply wouldn't come out. For some reason, when he heard these words, he felt a wave of dread wash over him. After a few hours with Naruto, and that Naruto, my son, is how male and female mate and produce offspring, do you understand? Minato sat in his chair in front of Naruto with his arms across his chest. Initially, Naruto remained silent and pale as a ghost until he said, you hentai. Minato was shocked to hear this, asking, what do you mean hentai, you little gaki, you're supposed to learn this stuff? Naruto didn't believe a word his father was saying. You're right, you're just trying to make me a pervert like Kakashi-san, and Arrow. Senin you hentai. Minato's eyes started to twitch at this. Minato's office outside Zev, who had raised numerous cubs in his time and found the talk to be difficult, sat outside of Minato's office and felt sorry for the man. He leaned closer to improve his hearing, and what he heard was loud shouting and crashing. I'll teach you to talk back, Gaki. He heard what sounded like Minato saying, bring it on, old man, and Naruto, and he could only sigh, this brings so many memories. Returning to the office after putting Naruto in a headlock and rendering him completely immobile, he made every effort to break free by shouting, let me go, to his father, but Minato simply blew him off. When Minato released him, he gave him a look that suggested he wasn't joking. Naruto, I'm going to explain this only once. When you get to be 13, your lichen blood will change and become even more dangerous, especially to Hinata. What do you mean dangerous to Hinata? Naruto asked his father, bewildered. Naruto started to feel anxious. What could happen? Since lichens are descended from wolves, we act on instinct, especially when it comes to mating and breeding. Minato sighed and started massaging his temples. Your lichen blood might try to breed with Hinata whether she is willing or not, Naruto, Minato said to his son. You mean I would try and rape Hinata? Chan, Naruto said, seemingly joking, and Minato simply nodded. If you're not careful, your lichen blood will take her as a mate in order to breed. The blonde lichen looked at his father, pleading for an answer. Is there something I can do? Of course, Minato could see what his son was asking, but there was no simple response. Naruto. The best way to control your lichen blood is to be calm and stay focused. Naruto simply took a seat and tried to look calm, but deep down he was terrified of what he could do, what he would do, and most importantly, what would happen to Hinata. That's all I can really offer at the moment. The boy nodded, indicating that he understood his father's words, and started to leave, but his father stopped him again before he could do so. Naruto, denying your feelings will make things harder, keep that in mind, Minato said. Naruto didn't answer, so he simply walked away. Compound Hyuga with Hinata at the compound. Hinata's mother, Tenten, and Kushina had completed all of the things Minato had told Naruto, including the fact that if one were to enter Hyuga Hinata's room, they might become blind from the intense red light that was Hinata, and that she would have to sit through everything that Kushina had to say about the body changes of men and women, childbirth, and the lichen's mating habits. When her mother asked, "Where are you going, Hinata-chan?" she ran to the door, making the other people scoff at her very strange behavior. After hearing all of this, however, Hinata felt a little better knowing that Naruto wasn't entirely himself when he did those things. She was a little afraid of him and wasn't sure if she could ever face him again, but she knew deep down that she couldn't live with herself if she didn't see him again. With a smile, she turned to face her and said, "I have to see him," before leaving. Hanabi, Kim, and Akaka all fell directly on top of one another as she opened the door. Hinata glanced down at the young children and said, "That's what you get for eavesdropping," before taking off. Tenten said aloud, "Those two are made for each other," and Kushina and Aki nodded in total agreement as the three women in the room simply sat there grinning. However, a moment later, Kushina scowled and said, "This is just the beginning. The clan elders won't be persuaded to allow them to be together in any way just because those two like each other." Aki couldn't help but smile and agree, saying, "Those two are going to have a huge fight on their hands." Kushina knew all too well, and Tenten, well, she just took their word for it for the time being. Still, she said, "They'll be okay." "Why aren't we ever told anything?" the children on the ground thought as the three older women conversed. Returning to the training ground, Naruto had run back to the training ground in the hopes of finding a place to vent his frustration on a tree or something, but he was unaware that Hinata had arrived shortly after him and was observing him from behind a tree. She watched as he repeatedly swore at the tree in front of him, leaving blood and small pieces of bark lying around, and she covered her mouth to keep from gasping aloud at the sight of her close friend torturing himself. She couldn't really handle it any longer after hearing the sound of a big piece of bark breaking her Naruto's knuckles. Naruto was trying to stop the bleeding by holding his brushed hand, but it wasn't helping at all. "Why am I such a baka, damn it?" he asked himself, and then he turned to see Hinata behind him. His eyes opened at the sight of her, and he was terrified of what she would do or say, but all she did was rub his brushed knuckles. "You're not a baka, Naruto-kun, not to me anyway," Hinata said in a sweet and compassionate voice. After Hinata bandaged Naruto's hands, the two of them went to the middle of the training field and just sat there, not looking at each other. At first, they were both a little nervous to be around each other, so they didn't say anything. Naruto sighed deeply and began to say, "Hinata, about what happened earlier today But before he could finish, Hinata interrupted, saying, "Naruto-kun, I understand what happened and I don't blame you really." These words didn't help Naruto feel better, as he asked, "How could you not blame me? I was monster cannibal." Hinata simply gave him a dejected look. "You are a person who is different and that makes you special." The recollection of those words from their childhood made Naruto smile. He was grinning when he didn't realize Hinata had gotten up close to his face. When Naruto realized that Hinata had moved close, she reached out and started rubbing his whisker lines before he could even ask her why. In contrast, Hinata was enjoying her activity and always liked the sounds Naruto made when she did it. With this small activity, all of Naruto's brain functions had shut down as he poured pleasure into Hinata's soft hands. After rubbing Naruto for a few minutes, Hinata leaned forward and had him lie on his back while she continued to rub him. After what seemed like 10 or 20 minutes, Hinata stopped rubbing, and Naruto returned to normal. The two grinned at each other, happy to be able to enjoy each other's company without fear, but something else caught their attention. Hinata was still on top of Naruto, and their faces were very close to each other. At first, the two didn't say anything. They simply leaned into each other, moving closer and closer until their lips met. A brief kiss that felt like a lifetime to Naruto and Hinata as they gradually withdrew. At first, the two remained silent and in the same pose until Naruto exclaimed, "Wow." Hinata laughed and gave into it once more, something Naruto didn't object to. After Naruto and Hinata kissed almost a year ago, things took a turn for the better and became amazing. Unbeknownst to the family, the two were happily dating. They would frequently take a picnic to one of the numerous training grounds for their dates. However, they occasionally went to a restaurant for a more refined meal when they didn't want to eat in the middle of the field. Since they began dating, their training had also significantly improved. They felt as though they had breached a barrier that had allowed their actual poetical expression to flow. The two were almost proficient in water walking and had already mastered tree walking. Along with Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto had begun studying Rasengan, one of his father's well-known jutsus. In contrast, Hinata was studying the Juken, had nearly perfected Hakesho Kaden, and was considering creating her own style. In summary, Naruto and Hinata had a good life. But it wasn't just Naruto and Hinata who were having a good time. Ken had made the decision to live alone for a while after the birth of Kim and Akaka. After some persuasion, the elders finally allowed him to go. After some time, Emiko was able to persuade her clan elders to grant her permission to temporarily leave the Hyuga compound. The two were able to spend as much time together as possible after renting a pleasant, small apartment within a week of meeting. When the elders learned of this, they naturally concluded that the two living together would corrupt one another, which would spell doom for the clans. Ken and Emiko were barely able to persuade the councils that living together would enhance their ability to work as a team and create more effective spy networks after hours of their complaints. To Ken and Emiko's delight, the elders abandoned the conversation and moved on to more urgent issues since they could see they were making no progress. As for Kim, Akaka, and Hanabi, they each faced their own unique set of minor obstacles in life. Like their older brother and sister before them, they had also begun the academy. Academy's first day, a new academy year had begun, which meant that many new kids had aspirations of becoming outstanding ninjas. For the kids, that was what it meant, but for the teachers, it meant another year of pranks and brats. However, there was one Chunin teacher, Amino Iruka, who was genuinely excited to teach this year. Iruka was the only Chunin who appeared to genuinely enjoy his work out of all those who were compelled to teach at the academy, and this year would be no exception as the siblings of his two favorite students were joining today. He had made the decision to apply for a transfer to teach first-year academy students after Naruto and Hinata had graduated. 3 new academy students were getting ready for their first day of classes while Iruka was thinking. Home in Namikaze. Kim had just finished packing for his first day of the academy at the Namikaze compound. He was prepared to depart after spending the majority of last night organizing his affairs. He was worried, though, because his sister never delivered on her promises to get her belongings later. In an attempt to be courteous, Kim went to his sister's bedroom and knocked on the door. When he knocked again, a little harder, saying, sister, it's time to get up," he got no response at first. This time, the door opened, revealing a half-awake girl with messy hair and a red eye, demonstrating that Akaka was not a morning person. With an expression of pure hatred on her face, the twin asked her brother, "What do you want, pretty boy?" Kim began to perspire in terror as she heard his sister's words, Sister, it's time to get up for the academy." When Akaka heard this, she turned to face her brother and asked, "When must we return?" She asked as she rubbed her eye, and Kim simply smiled and said, "About 10 minutes from now." Akaka's brother gave her a kind smile, but it was clear that he was serious, so she slammed the door and started running around her room, screaming and swearing about how she should have done all of this last night. Kim simply shook his head back and forth outside the door before making his way to the dining room, where he couldn't help but think, "I wonder what Hanabi-chan is doing." Home in Hyuga. The youngest member of the Hyuga compound, Hyuga Hanabi, was having a similar issue as she prepared for the academy. She, like Kim, had set everything up the night before, but she was making sure she had everything she needed and that she looked presentable so as not to embarrass the Hyuga name and to impress Kim. Since she was more of a tomboy than a princess, Hyuga Hanabi, the second-born member of the Hyuga clan, had been standing in front of a mirror for more than an hour, making sure that her appearance was appropriate. However, today was different because she was going to take the first steps toward becoming a ninja for her village, just like her older sister and older cousin before her. As she checked her face for any problems, she had forgotten how long she had been there and how other people needed to use the restroom. When she heard a noise coming from the bathroom door, she went to check it and saw her sister Hinata standing there. "Morning Hinata. Nay-chan," Hanabi said with a smile to her older sibling. Hinata, however, refused to smile at Hanabi. Instead, she calmly and sternly glared at the young child, saying, "Hanabi, it's time for you to leave. You've been in here for 3 hours." Hanabi simply crossed her arms and pouted, saying, "I was just finishing up in here. You look fine." Hinata simply rolled her eyes at her sibling and said, "I'm sure you will make a fine impression on Kim-kun, but you need to hurry up. Kami, I just want to make a good impression on my first day." Hinata then started to leave, with a blushing Hanabi standing behind her. Hinata had walked to the main house dining room and sat next to her parents, enjoying a warm cup of tea and a cinnamon bun as she reflected on her first day at the academy and laughed about how anxious she had been at the time. As soon as she finished her tea, Hanabi entered the room grinning and saying, "Ready." As the older Hyuga squeezed the life out of Hanabi, Aki couldn't help but say, "My little Hanabi is growing up so fast." When Aki finally let go, Hanabi took a moment to catch her breath, but she saw her mother staring at her strangely. Aki simply stood there, her face full of curiosity, and asked, "Hanabi-chan, there's something on your forehead, is that a zit?" At this, Hinata simply slammed her head against the table and said, "Ka-san, why did you do that?" Hanabi turned white as a ghost and fled back to the bathroom, screaming. "I thought it would be funny," Aki said with a simple smile. Both families left their homes when everyone was ready to send their kids to the academy, and soon after, they ran into each other and decided to go together. The kids didn't mind because they were all so close, but the villagers were the issue. The mistrust between the two clans was well known, particularly among the villagers, and rumors were bound to spread quickly when the leaders of the two clans and their kids were seen walking together. However, it didn't really matter because it was the kids' day, and they were going to try to enjoy it. In the academy, after arriving at the Shinobi Academy, the group surveyed the area and noticed a large number of kids gathered around the entrance, many of whom were discussing with their friends their aspirations to become great shinobi or to become the next Hokage by mastering numerous jutsu. After a while, one student saw the Namikaze and informed everyone that, "Hey, that's the Hokage." Almost all of the students turned to face Minato, their eyes wide, and they started whispering things like, "The Hokage kids are with us this year, that's the Hyuga family, and we better be nice to them or else." For some, like the Uchiha and some Hyuga, it was the way things were supposed to be, but the Namikaze didn't like that and tried not to let it get to their heads. This continued for a while and was starting to irritate the two families, but they dealt with it because it was the same old thing. Rich family plus children of rich family equals everyone has to be nice to you. It was like some unwritten rule people came up with to get on Noble's good side. The families were growing increasingly irritated as the whispers continued, and then they heard a little laugh and an older voice say, "Things never seem to change for the young." Kim, Akaka, and Hanabi shouted, "Old monkey," and ran directly to Sarutobi, the former Hokage, and the children couldn't help but smile as they looked in the direction of the voice. Not only were the kids happy to see Sarutobi, but Naruto and Hinata were also happy to see the old man, as Naruto referred to him. Sarutobi was like a grandfather figure to them, and even though they had grandfathers from their own clans, they couldn't match Sarutobi's ability to always be there for them when they needed him. Minato owned the man more than anyone could have imagined because Sarutobi had taught him many things before he became Hokage and was the one who married him and Kushina. Yes, Sarutobi was a great man not only as a teacher or shinobi but also as a friend. The old man even held a special place in the hearts of the adults for his years as a village leader, his actions in the line of duty, and the sacrifices he had made in his personal life for the village. The old man smirked as he approached Minato and bowed before him, saying, "Good day, Hokage." "Sama." Minato simply stood there, his left eye twitching, saying, "Sarutobi, you know I hate when you do that, so please stop, right now." Sarutobi simply laughed, "I'm sorry Minato, I just couldn't resist." The old man turned to face the other Hyugas and grinned, then turned to Heishi and Aki, saying, "And you both looking well Heishi, Aki." After that, Sarutobi focused on the kids, saying, "Hinata and Naruto, you two have changed so much since I last saw you. Are you two dating yet?" The old man simply laughed and looked at the other kids who bowed to him after hearing this, while the two teenagers just blushed and remained silent. Once more, Sarutobi smiled at them and said, "I'm glad that you three are joining the academy today." The three just stared at the old man, wondering what he was talking about, with the exception of Akaka, who assumed he was senile. "I'm not senile Akaka. Chan," Sarutobi said, glaring at Akaka. Akaka simply stared at the man, asking, "How the hell does he do that?" Sarutobi turned back to the other two and said, "The reason I'm happy you three are joining is because my grandson Konohamaru is also joining as well." Following Sarutobi's statement, a tiny voice said, "You call me Gigi." Everyone turned to see a young boy who appeared to be much younger than Sarutobi but was wearing an odd helmet. The boy approached Sarutobi as the elderly man grinned and said, "This is my grandson Konohamaru." The boy, now known as Konohamaru, asked his grandfather, "Gigi, who are these weirdos?" After Sarutobi had said that, he then turned to face the group in front of him. With the exception of Akaka, who never took an insult lying down, the entire Namikaze and Hyuga family glared at the young boy and did nothing to show respect for Sarutobi. Akaka then went over to the Konohamaru and punched him in the face. Many onlookers couldn't help but drop their jaws, but none were more shocked than Konohamaru, who clutched the side of his face that had been struck and turned to face Akaka, asking, "You hit me?" "Damn right, I did, and I'll do it again. I can't stand people with a stick up their ass like you," Akaka said, giving the boy a glare. Rather than attempting a retort, Konohamaru would simply look at Akaka and say, "You hit me." Akaka would simply blink in confusion, "Yeah, big deal. Are you going to do something about it or what?" In response, Konohamaru simply said, "You hit me. You got a nice right hawk." Unexpectedly, Akaka blushed, something that had never happened before. Konohamaru grinned as he looked at her and said, "I'm telling you the truth, that was great, you must train a lot." As Akaka's blush deepened to a deeper shade of red, she merely said, "Arigato," and held out her hand to assist the boy in standing up. Minato and Kushina were pleased that their only daughter had made a new friend outside the clan, but what really upset them was that Akaka, who could write a book about tomboys with Kushina as a company author, was blushing like Hinata around the young man. Both Minato and Kushina had to see where this would go. The older children, Naruto and Kim, had conflicting opinions about the relationship between the two. They were overly protective of Akaka's first friend, a boy who was still holding her hand, but they also supported her making a friend on the first day of the academy. The two sisters were laughing with Hinata and Hanabi over what was probably Akaka's first crush, and they were also planning how to best retaliate against Akaka for making fun of them for their feelings for Kim and Naruto. They were both standing again, but for some reason, Akaka and Konohamaru were still holding hands. Akaka noticed and blushed again, asking, Konohamaru, could you let go of my hand?" Konohamaru looked down at his hand and saw that he was still holding Akaka, so he let go while blushing a little. "Well, I guess I'll see you inside Akaka-chan later." Akaka watched as Konohamaru was leaving and yelled, "I'll see you there Konohamaru-kun." After Konohamaru had released his hold on Akaka's hand, he started to rub the back of his head in a manner reminiscent of Naruto. But as she was thinking about it, Kim appeared beside her and grinned, saying, "You're doing an amazing impression of Hinata-san, sister." He called me Akaka. Chan. I called him Konohamaru-kun. This made everyone laugh, including Hinata, whose face turned redder as Akaka glared at everyone and yelled, "Shut up." The children said goodbye to their parents and started running into the academy to start their training as shinobi for the village when the school bell rang, signaling that classes would soon begin. The parents started to leave after all the kids had entered the building to go about their own lives, but before Naruto and Hinata could leave, Minato interrupted them, saying, "Hey Naruto, want some ramen?" Minato simply grinned at his son and said, "Okay, Naruto, maybe later." Naruto simply turned to face his father and grinned, "No thanks Hinata, and I have to train, maybe later, okay at Tucson." Both Hinata and Naruto then departed. Heishi looked at Minato and said, "Hokage Sama, there is something we need to discuss." Minato simply sighed and said, "Lead the way." As soon as they left, Minato had a sudden realization, Naruto just said no to ramen. Everyone else realized the same thing, and they started to wonder what was going on between the two. With Hinata and Naruto, once Naruto and Hinata were out of their parents' sight, smell, and earshot, they pulled into an empty alley and started making out. They continued doing this for a few minutes before breaking up for air, but they were both beaming broadly. Naruto looked at her bewilderedly and said, "Of course, Hinata-chan, you are way more important than ramen, so of course I would turn down ramen for you." Hinata was blushing, but she was happy as she looked at the blonde-haired lichen in front of her. "Naruto-kun, I can't believe that you turned down ramen for me." When Hinata heard this, she couldn't help but cry as she embraced her beloved, Naruto-kun. As she was doing so, she smelled blood in the air and looked up to see that blood was indeed leaking out of Naruto's mouth. Blood was dripping from Naruto's mouth because he wanted to do something special for Hinata, and since she came from a clan that was known for having odd tastes, he thought that biting your lips as hard as he could and then filling his mouth with blood was the best way to show that he cared for his vampire girlfriend. The blonde was relishing the sensation of having his lover's tongue inside his mouth, saying, "It's always the shy ones. Thank you, Kami." Hinata, on the other hand, loved every moment of it as she pressed her lips and tongue into his mouth and tried her best to explore every inch of Naruto's mouth, something that most people would consider the least romantic thing a person could do for someone they loved. As he was thanking Kami for his good fortune, Naruto was unaware that Hinata had left his mouth and was approaching his neck, biting down. He felt this and turned to face Hinata, who was licking and moaning at the blood gushing from the wound, but he wasn't bothered because he had had the bite marks to prove that she had done this before, and he had to admit it felt good when she did it. After what felt like hours of unadulterated joy, the two concluded their task and parted ways, with Hinata blushing bright red for what she had done and a look of shame in her eyes as she thought she was being too forward, while Naruto sat on the ground, gasping for air and attempting to get used to the lack of blood. Hinata glanced at the blonde boy, trying to form the correct words, N. Naruto-kun. G. Gomen. She avoided making eye contact until she heard Naruto laugh, at which point she looked up to see him grinning brightly and said, "We should do that more often, Hina-can." Hinata smiled and flushed at Naruto, but she quickly realized that she needed to ask him a crucial question. Naruto-kun. The blonde lichen turned to face his lover and asked, "Ya Hinata-chan? Naruto-kun. My family asked me to perform this ceremony, and I was wondering if you'd like to attend." Hinata stared, searching for the right words. After giving her a quick glance, Naruto's smile somehow expanded and he said, "I would love to, Hinata." After saying that, the two resumed kissing. Alongside their parents back with the parents, they were having a simple tea and dango meal while talking about the current clan events, primarily the ceremony Hinata was going to. Sensing the tension in the air, Minato did his best to start a conversion. "So Heishi-san, what is it you wish to discuss?" The Hyuga clan leader looked at the Lichen clan leader, a man he was supposed to despise with all of his heart but instead saw as a friend and ally. At first, the two families sat across from each other, just staring at each other with a look of complete seriousness on their faces. Minato looked at Heishi, perplexed as to why he was telling him this, given that it was regarded as a clan secret and the Hyuga treated their secrets like sacred artifacts. Heishi sighed and said, "Hokage Sama, the reason ask you here was to discuss a certain ritual that happens to a Hyuga that marks them as an adult." After he recovered from his shock, Minato gave Heishi a funny look and asked, Do your elders know what you're about to tell me? Heishi said. No, they don't know, and I have no intention of telling them until the day of the ceremony. Minato simply moaned. So you didn't tell your elders, and you're telling, which will cause them to bicker with my elders, causing complaints and eventually more paperwork for me. As Minato was complaining, Kushina simply rolled her eyes and nudged him, saying, don't be such a big baby. Then, looking to the Aki for clarification, Kushina said, Kushina-san, the reason we are telling you this is because a clan rule says that a close friend must attend the ritual. Kushina could see where this was going, and it's obvious she is going to invite Naruto to this. Everyone nodded, realizing that the son of the Namikaze clan would be permitted to witness the Hyuga clan's most secret tradition, and everyone thought, being a parent can really suck. Following that thought, Kushina crossed her arms, sat back in her chair, and thought, have you noticed that Naruto and Hinata seem to have gotten a lot closer lately? Minato trailed off as everyone looked at her and acknowledged that she was correct. They have been spending more and more time with each other, you don't think there? Everyone understood what he was talking about, and Heishi was the first to say, no, Hinata. She just a child. And so is Naruto. They never even kissed. However, there was still silence as Kushina said, if that boy makes me a grandmother anytime soon, so help me Kami. The parents had only just realized how much they had been missing with their kids. In the academy after their first day of classes, a large number of students were lounging in front of the academy. Some were practicing their shuriken training, others were playing around, and some were even competing with their kunai to see who could outdo them. Akaka and Kim were among the students who were making an effort. Since Akaka came from a shinobi family, she not only hit the dummy but was only a few meters away from the center, despite every student's best efforts to get the kunai to hit the center of the training dummy. Many of the nearby children simply stared at the dummy, amazed that a girl of her own age could outperform them. On the other hand, after what she had done, Akaka was wearing a huge Naruto-like smile, but it vanished as soon as she heard Konohamaru say, wow, Akaka-chan, you're amazing. After receiving a compliment from Konohamaru, Akaka was blushing once more. Akaka was too preoccupied with Konohamaru to notice Kim aiming at one of the dummies until she heard a loud piercing sound and the sound of wood breaking. She turned to face her brother, who had also thrown a kunai at the dummy, and when she saw that he had not only hit the center but had gone straight through it, Akaka simply glared at him and muttered, show off. It was Hanabi's turn next, but unlike Akaka and Kim, she was behind two dummies with a kunai in each hand. She stood there for a while, closed her eyes, and did nothing, but then she moved and threw both kunai at the two targets, hitting them in the center. After she finished, Hanabi grinned at her work, thinking that practicing had indeed paid off. As Hanabi turned to face her friends, Kim gave her a smile that made her blush, and Akaka gave her a thumbs up while simultaneously giving her a slight glare. Hanabi was happy to have friends like Kim and Akaka and hoped that they would eventually be on the same team. Some of those who watched disagreed with what the three were doing. They were taught by their parents that oddballs like Hyuga and Namikaze had no place in the shinobi ranks or even as village residents. Clans like these, along with Aburame and Inuzuka, should be exterminated, and they believed their children shared this view. Even though their parents were on the same level as the civilian council, they knew they couldn't do anything to Kim or Akaka, but Hanabi was different because her family was on the same level. A small group of these kids started to gather and started walking toward Hanabi and Kim, with the largest of the punks, a boy named Moi, leading the way. Kim felt someone behind him as he was talking to Hanabi about finishing her kunai throwing, and when he turned around, he saw Moi glaring at him for some reason. Kim didn't know what he had done, so he just grinned, and Moi asked, can I help you? When Hanabi saw what had happened to Kim, she would have run over to help him, but two of Moi's lackeys blocked her path, and Moi appeared from behind her with a maniacal expression in his eye. This was not the reaction Kim wanted, as Moi pouted directly in his face and knocked him back. Now, Hanabi was one of those people who could admit when she was scared, and this was one of those occasions when Moi looked at her with a sick kind of pleasure in his eyes. Hanabi looked to Akaka for support, but three other boys were blocking her, so she chose to stand her ground and ask, what do you want? Instead of responding, Moi simply clenched his fist and punched Hanabi in the stomach, causing her to collapse to the ground and glare at him. Moi then gave her another twisted smile and kicked her back with a quick kick to the side of her head. When Kim noticed what was going on, he tried to go and stop it, but two older boys who were also working with Moi quickly restrained him. Kim attempted to fight the two off and knock them back, but his abilities were limited to long-range attack, strategy, and a little genjutsu. She was on her hands and knees, breathing heavily, and blood was streaming down from the wound on her head. Moi, who was admiring his work, decided to make fun of the little Hyuga by saying, "Hey freak, there is a little blood on the ground, why don't you drink it?" Hanabi simply glared at Moi, but he did nothing, which infuriated him as he brought his foot to the stop of her head and slammed into the ground, keeping her face in the dirt. Moi simply grinned. When Kim realized what was happening, he continued to struggle unsuccessfully against the two boys holding him down until one of them became irritated and punched Kim in the face, telling him to shut up. Unfortunately, Moi heard this and turned to face them, asking, "Is the Namikaze freak causing you any trouble?" "Nothing we can't handle, boss," was the two's simple reply. The two boys followed instructions to hold Kim's head in the direction of Hanabi, but they were perplexed as to why Moi had asked for a kunai. Moi appeared unimpressed by the response, wearing another sick smile and saying, "Make sure the wolf freak facing this way and somebody hand me a kunai." When Moi got the kunai, he took his foot off the top of Hanabi's head and tugged her hair so he could look her in the eyes. As she looked at the kunai in Moi's hands, she started to worry about what his intentions were leading to, and she wasn't alone. Every child outside was paying attention to what was happening, and many of them were worried about how far this was going to go, and some had even gone to their senseis for help. Even the lackeys that followed Moi were beginning to wonder what was going on and what was going to happen. The truth is that many parents did despise the ninja clans for their special abilities, but they had no real reason to hate those families, and the only reason Moi's lackeys did what he said was because his father was a powerful council member. Moi brought the kunai closer and closer to Hanabi's face, almost piercing the flesh, but he felt something grab his arm and stopped him. He looked to see who or what had caught his arm and dared to interfere with his fun, but Konohamaru held him back. Moi held the kunai up towards Hanabi's face, getting a sick pleasure from seeing the fear in her eyes, almost seeing what his intentions were truly through his eyes. Incredulous that someone would actually dare to defy him, Moi clenched his teeth and asked Konohamaru, "What do you think you're doing?" Konohamaru simply glared at the leader and said, "I'm stopping you from hurting Hanabi-san, you asshole." He removed the kunai from Hanabi's face and swung it at Konohamaru, cutting his cheek in the process. Moi held the kunai at Konohamaru and glared at the boy, saying, "That's what you get for helping freaks." He looked at Hanabi, who was still holding her hair, and said, "Like this damn monster." Konohamaru held his bloody cheek, but he continued to stare at Moi, who showed no remorse or guilt for what he had just done. "As you can see, I'm in control here and there is nothing you or anyone can do to stop me," Konohamaru said, taking a small step forward when he noticed that Moi's defense was open. Unfortunately, Moi saw this and held the kunai back to Hanabi, saying, "Careful, make a wrong move and the freak dies." Konohamaru did nothing. "Since my Ado-san is a council member, I am free to do as I please because no one can stop me." After Moi finished his brief speech, there was a noise that sounded like laughter. Moi turned to see who would dare make fun of him and looked down to see it was Hanabi. He glared at the little girl with hatred, asking, "What are you laughing at, you fucking bloodsucking freak?" When she stopped, she turned to face Moi, who continued to glare at her, saying, "You really think that just because you're Ado-san is a council member you can have everything handed to you?" Moi continued to glare at her, allowing his rage to take over, saying, "Your Ado-san is nothing but a greedy imbecile who does nothing but talk and complain." Hanabi put on a devilish smirk, realizing how she was approaching him. Moi felt his hold on the kunai tighten as he heard Hanabi say, "How dare this? How dare this filthy monster mock me?" The words screamed in his mind as he stabbed Hanabi in the face, marking the last straw for him before his rage took over. Kim's perspective time seemed to slow down for Kim as he watched his closest friend, his most valuable person, be tortured in front of him and he was powerless to stop it. He lowered his head in shame and asked himself, "Why? Why am I so weak?" Self-doubt started to creep in, and for the first time in his life, he felt rage, pure animalistic rage. And not just Moi but also at himself for being so weak that he was unable to protect Hanabi, his friend, and his. Kim stopped wondering what word he couldn't. It didn't matter, though, because a loud scream and the smell of blood, not just any blood, but Hanabi's blood, sparked Kim's thoughts of self-hatred. He looked up to see where Hanabi was, but was startled when he felt something wet hit his face. He couldn't see it, but he could tell it was Hanabi's blood. Kim looked at Hanabi's face, which was turned to the ground, and he saw that she was covering it with her hands, dripping blood through her fingers. Moi was standing there like he had won a great battle, holding his bloody kunai high in triumph. Upon witnessing this, Kim felt as though something was attempting to rip from him and take control, and for some reason, he wanted it to happen. He wanted to let this force take control, to release and destroy anyone who stood in his way, but most of all, he wanted to protect his Hanabi. Chan, to ensure that she was safe and unharmed from anyone who would harm her. It was with these thoughts that this dark force continued to grow stronger within him, and he liked it. Not from Kim's perspective. After admiring the bloody kunai and the crimson liquid's glint in the light, Moi turned to face Hanabi, who was still holding her face in agony over what Moi had done. Sensing that he could amuse himself further, Moi approached her and pressed his ear to hers, asking, "Why are you hiding your face? Don't you want your little boyfriend to see your new look?" When Hanabi heard this, he cried out of concern for Kim's reaction rather than making a retort. Moi missed the change that was taking place with Kim because he was preoccupied. Moi lackeys were still holding Kim down, but they were too preoccupied with what their leaders were doing to pay much attention to their task. If they had, they would have seen that Kim's breathing had increased significantly, his nails had grown sharper like claws, and his teeth had started to grow into fangs. The second lackey noticed what was happening to his partner, looked down at Kim, and saw the changes for a moment before he was pouched right in the face. Hard. One of the lackeys started to feel Kim struggling and was about to shut him up with another punch when he noticed the changes that were happening to Kim. The lackey was about to say something, but he never got the chance because Kim already had a clawed hand around his throat and threw him off to the side. "What are you two bakas doing? Hold that monster down now." Moi became enraged upon hearing his two lackeys and turning to see what was happening. He saw one of them unconscious from a massive explosion on his neck, and the other was covering his face with his hands as blood poured through them. Unfortunately, Moi would have realized that he was in actual danger, the kind where his life was now at stake, had he paid more attention. Having just finished bandaging Konohamaru's cut cheek, Akaka noticed a strange smell in the air and turned to see that her brother was the source of the scent. Since neither Akaka nor Kim had ever witnessed anyone in their family undergo a transformation, she had no idea what to expect, but when she saw how this was affecting Kim, Akaka started to feel something that had not been natural to her: fear. She was afraid of the psychological effects this would have on her brother. He started to slowly stand up with Kim because, for some reason, his senses were heightened. He could hear every heartbeat from the kids around him and could actually smell the fear in the air as he stared at his prey. The person who had injured his mate, the person who was holding his mate's blood, the person who was his enemy, the person who was his prey, and the person who was going to die. Moi sensed the bloodlust in the air and wondered if one of the shinobi had visited the academy to witness the events, but then he recalled that his father was a council member and that he would defend him. As Moi calmed down, he thought he was safe and turned to face Kim to show he wasn't scared of him. Moi tried to put on a glare, but it quickly subsided when he saw how competently black Kim's eyes were, with not a hint of white in them or his pupils, which appeared to have sunk into the dark pool that was Kim's eyes. Many of the students started running as quickly as they could to escape what would probably be a bloodbath, but the few who didn't run away wanted to see what would happen and to make sure that nothing was missed if Anbu showed up and turned this into a crime scene. Everyone who saw this took a step back in fear of what would happen because they knew that if a Namikaze family's eyes were black, they would transform. When he was standing in front of his victim, Kim had lost all sense of reason. His instincts were telling him to kill the person who had injured his partner, and he was willing to listen to them. He started to move forward, but he kept his distance, waiting for a chance to attack and start the carnage. The monster in front of him made Moi shackle in sheer terror. He had heard that the Namikaze could change shape, but he had never given that much thought and now wished he had been more aware of these creatures. Since he had no means of fending off the monster, Moi decided to withdraw for the time being. He started to back up, holding his position, but as he did so, he felt something grab it and turned to see that Hanabi was holding him. When he realized his error, he turned to see where Kim was, but instead he saw him standing directly in front of him, grinning evilly. Before Moi had a chance to gasp in shock, Kim had already put his hand around his throat and held him aloft. Many were taken aback by this because, in the few hours they had known Kim, they could see that he was a good-hearted, kind boy who was always courteous and never did anything wrong. Akaka was suffering more than most of the other kids because she couldn't believe that her brother had changed into a monster and that this creature had been brought into the world with her. Hanabi was also devastated by Kim's new personality, and she managed to get a brief glimpse of what was happening to Kim, which devastated her. Kim was ecstatic because his prey had let his guard down, so he made his move and was extremely satisfied because he had not only caught his prey but was also causing him pain. He watched as he held his prey by the throat, enjoying the sight of his enemy gasping for air, until he could no longer enjoy watching his prey choke and threw Moi into a nearby wall. But Kim didn't stop there. He went to where Moi was sitting, gasping for air, and he grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and held him against the wall. Kim then punched Moi in the race, knocking out 3 of his teeth, and Moi moaned in agony as he felt another punch to his face, followed by a third, a fourth, and finally a fifth. Nothing happened after the fifth punch, much to Mwa's delight, but he was mistaken when he opened his eyes to see Kim grinning and holding out his hand to reveal his claws as he slowly slashed them across Mwa's face. The pain Mwa was in was unbelievably intense, as he scrambled at the top of his lungs only to have Kim pouch him in the gut. After that punch, Mwa was breathing heavily because Kim had knocked the wind out of him, and he fervently wanted this torment to stop. However, when Mwa discovered something sharp piercing his shoulder, he looked to see that it was Kim, who had bitten down on his shoulder and was painfully tearing the skin off. Mwa was so horrified by what he saw that his mind was so overwhelmed with pain that he simply shut down. Everyone in the area stared at what had just happened, and some people went completely white when they saw Kim rip a large piece of skin off Mwa's shoulder. They all stood there, terrified to move or make any noise for fear that Kim would turn on them too. Aloud, "What is going on here? Class started 10 minutes ago," prompted one of the academy instructors to finally come out and ask why so many of the children had not returned to class. He assumed that many of them had simply refused to do so, but what he saw in front of him was obviously not what he had anticipated. A young Hyuga girl was on the ground, covering her face with blood pouring from it, and a student was comatose with bruising all over his face. A large piece of skin on his shoulder appeared torn off, and blood was streaming down from the wound. The instructor then turned to see the son of the Hokage Namikaze Kim standing with his back to everyone. Everyone gasped when Kim started to turn around because he was standing there with his eyes still completely black and blood streaming from his chest. This was the day Namikaze Kim experienced what it was like to be a full-fledged lichen, and when he woke up, the experience would follow him for the rest of his life. Ramen bar Ichiraku, a bowl of miso ramen, was placed in front of Naruto as he sat at his favorite. He wasn't hungry, though, not even for ramen. He sat there letting the food in front of him and stirring the noodles in the bowl, but he didn't care because he had more important things to think about. Naruto considered his younger brother, Kim. Naruto's younger siblings had gone to the Shinobi Academy for the first time 3 days prior. Naruto thought the two would enjoy themselves and make lots of friends with the other kids when they went there, but that didn't happen. Rather, his siblings were compelled to fight, which had the worst outcome. A fight between siblings was initiated by a boy named Mwa and his girlfriend's younger sibling, Hanabi. Mwa apparently had an issue with people who had unusual skills and looks, and she made everyone aware of it. In the belief that his politically influential father would shield him from harm, Mwa and a group of supporters had attacked his siblings. What actually occurred, though, was that Mwa had attacked Hanabi with the intention of killing or gravely wounding her. By doing this, Kim, a good-natured and gentle boy, accomplished something that no one had anticipated. Hanabi Kim's lichen blood had awoken in the most terrible way possible when Mwa and Hanabi attacked. Kim's inner lichen did awaken out of violent rage and bloodlust, but it did so because she wanted to protect someone. Even a partial transformation at a young age was something to be encouraged of when unlocking one's transformation, but Kim wasn't one of those people. Instead, the young lichen refused to acknowledge anyone, not even Akaka, because he felt ashamed and disgusted by what he had done. Naruto began to worry about Kim's recent withdrawal and depression. Signing Naruto didn't notice anyone approaching from behind until he felt arms encircle him, but he continued to stare at his cold ramen. "That and more, Hinata." "Chan," was the angel's voice, and as he lightly kissed Hinata's lips, Naruto grinned at the sight of the person behind him. He recognized the arms, the scent, and the voice that whispered into his ear, "Kiss for your thoughts, Naruto-kun?" The female vampire could tell that something was bothering her lover, but she still smiled at his affection. In an attempt to get her lover to open up, Hinata, who was aware of his internal turmoil, said, "Naruto-kun, what's wrong? You can tell me." Naruto put on a smile and said, "Nothing's wrong, Hinata." "Chan, why would anything be wrong?" Naruto then glared at her lover and said, "Naruto-kun, please don't lie to me, okay? You and I both know I can read emotions like a book, and you suck at lying." Naruto criticized Hinata's words because they were not only true, but they also hurt. Kim isn't doing so well. He refused to make any contact with the other clan members. "I'm starting to get concerned. He distancing himself from everyone, even me and Akaka. He barely eats or sleeps. I don't know what to do, Hinata. Chan, I'm really scared." The two were silent, struggling to find the right words to say, until the silence was broken. At first, Hinata didn't answer, even though she was aware of and partially comprehended the issues he was facing. She put her hand on Naruto and squeezed it lightly, saying, "I'm afraid we're having similar issues at Hyuga compound as well." When he heard this, Naruto looked at Hinata with a serious and worried expression on his face, asking, How is Hanabi? Chan?" Naruto felt even more pressured by the thought of her younger sibling. Hinata had to use every ounce of her willpower to contain her tears in front of everyone. Sensing that Hinata was in agony, Naruto put her in his arms, rubbing her back and whispering comforting words. Hinata allowed her lover to hold her without protest. The two reluctantly separated and regained emotional control after the emotional distress had subsided. While Hinata required a few more minutes but eventually had everything under control, Naruto found it to be relatively quick. Since the incident at the academy, Hinata and her clan had been having a difficult time. The elders were not amenable to Hanabi's refusal to reveal her face to anyone since that day. They felt that Hanabi's fate was shameful and that she ought to be punished for helping Kim, which not only embarrassed the clan but also the ancestors. But Heishi intervened and stopped them before the elders had a chance. After paying for the meal, they decided to go for a walk because they could not expect the answer to arrive anytime soon. After that, the two teenagers strolled around the village, examining one another in an attempt to solve their problems. Tower of Hokage. In an attempt to concentrate on managing the village's affairs, Minato sat at his desk and went through his documents. However, his thoughts kept returning to his youngest son, Kim, whenever he attempted to concentrate on his work. Like almost everyone else in the village, he was aware of what transpired between Kim and Moi, and Minato was worried about his youngest son. Since then, Kim had displayed mild symptoms of depression and appeared lost and broken. Every time he and Kushina attempted to speak with the young pup, he would simply respond, "I'm okay," and that was that. Minato put another piece of paper on the pile, shook his head, and singed it. However, Minato noticed that his office door was open and that Heishi entered with a blank expression, saying, "We need to speak Hokage. Sama." Home in Namikaze, Akaka practiced throwing shuriken in front of a targeting dummy in one of her family's dojos. She had been practicing for over an hour, but every time she threw, she got worse. She was aware of the thing that was diverting her attention. She was upset about what had happened to her brother. Her brother had been a shadow of his former self ever since the academy. He would pretend that nothing had happened and act like his usual self when everyone tried to get him to open up. But Akaka could read her brother like a book and could see right through the pain he was wearing to conceal everything. Even though her brother would never acknowledge it, Akaka knew he was crying inside. According to some legends, a twin could always tell how the other was feeling through feelings, physical or spiritual presence, and occasionally even telepathy. Because of some weird bond they shared, Akaka was always able to sense what her brother could, which is why she believed in those stories. Hell, you have an inner connection to someone you haven't seen in 9 months despite missing their company. Since her sibling was constantly so emotional, Akaka had learned over the years to mostly ignore his feelings, which at times annoyed her. She was unable to ignore it this time as she usually did because Kim's emotions and her own were interfering with her ability to concentrate. She had been thinking and feeling about that day at the academy and the beast Kim had nearly turned into all the time lately. She kept experiencing a different emotion each time she reflected on Kim's metamorphosis. She was envious of her brother's discovery that he could change his fist, even if only partially. Like many of her clan's young pups, she had always trained in the hopes that one day they would discover the secrets underlying her family's skills. But no matter how much practice she did, she would never be able to do it. She then discovers that Kim was able to complete it on his first attempt, and that he beat her to it despite having far less training experience than she did. She was jealous that her brother had discovered a new skill that he was better at. There were things Akaka wished she could do that Kim could, but she would never publicly acknowledge this. In terms of strategy and preparation, Kim was unquestionably more intelligent than she was. In addition to being able to read between the lines and see hidden meanings, he was also able to use the appropriate words in conversation to bring an adversary to ruin. Kim also possessed greater expertise in areas such as medicine, weapons, poisons, and traps. Even so, there were moments when she detested her brother. There were moments when she thought she was her brother's shadow and would never be appreciated in his company. Although Akaka was aware that their family treated them equally, she detested the fact that occasionally her brother received more respect than she did. Even though Akaka was physically stronger than her brother and more skilled at hand combat, there were moments when she felt inadequate. Despite being a woman, Akaka was more adept at techniques, controlling her chakras, and thinking quickly than her brother. Sometimes, though, it seemed like her brother was still better, and she detested him for it. Regretfully, in addition to her hatred for her brother, Akaka felt guilty about thinking negatively about her siblings. She felt ashamed of her brother for more reasons than just that. She knew something was wrong with Kim that day, but she did nothing to truly support her brother. She hadn't really helped him at all, even now. Akaka had also been experiencing another emotion, which was fear. Her fear took over when she imagined her brother becoming that beast. She grew terrified of what would happen to him and to herself when she changed every time she considered the savagery and bloodlust that emanated from Kim that day. She questioned whether she would turn into a mindless animal that was more afraid of killing and slaughter than anything else. After gathering her thoughts, Akaka concluded that there was only one person who could truly assist Kim and that her brother needed assistance. Sadly, based on what she had heard, that individual required assistance on par with that of her brother. As Akaka made her way to her brother's room, she could feel his feelings growing more intense with every step and that they were beginning to hurt her deeply. Akaka could almost taste the inner turmoil leaking from her sibling's room as she stood in front of the room that was her twin's domain. After taking a deep breath, Akaka knocked on her brother's bedroom door and said, "Hey pretty dot boy, open up, we need to talk." Akaka received a silent response along with feelings of hurt and self-resentment. Akaka had to choose option B since she was aware that her brother would not open the door regardless of what she said. Akaka made a fist, cracking her knuckles, and slammed it into the door, easily breaking it as she stepped into the room. She had to give her eyes time to get used to the room's lack of lighting. As she allowed her other senses to take over, she became aware that she was not alone in the room when she heard a faint heartbeat. The strong smell of salt and moisture that filled her nostrils, probably from tears, was what really got to her. After a while, her eyes adapted to the darkness and she noticed a figure sitting on the floor with arms wrapped around his legs and his legs pressed against his chest. There were red marks all over his upper arm, which were clearly scratches from his own claws. His eyes were bloodshot and red from tears, but his face had a blank expression that betrayed no emotion. He was always such an emotional crybaby, he said. Standing in front of her brother, Akaka gazed intently into his eyes, hoping to elicit some sort of reaction from him. "Hi, brother, there is something that I need from you. I need you to stop this bullshit now," Akaka said, shivering when she heard Kim blinking in response to the question, "Is there something you need, sister?" With a puzzled expression on his face, Kim said, "Whatever do you mean, sister? I'm perfectly fine." Akaka was getting annoyed and felt cold again when she heard the same emptiness in his voice, pointing a finger at him and saying, "That's it right there, damn it. You say there is nothing wrong with you but I can tell there is." When Akaka heard this, he didn't let it deter her. "I don't know how you feel right now, Kim, but I do know you better than anyone else and always will." Kim gave his sister a snarky glare, something he rarely did, and said, "What do you know about me? How in the world could you possibly understand how the hell I feel, sister?" Kim's concern and worry for him were evident when he looked at his sister. He was hurting the person who had always been by his side the most while he was sitting in his room pouting and feeling sorry for himself. Kim's mental barriers had collapsed when he witnessed his sister's anguish, and he could feel the tears welling up inside of him and spilling out. As her brother tried his hardest to wipe away the tears streaming down his face, Akaka stomped at him. She put both arms around her twin in the sincere hope that it would help after seeing her womb mate in this state. Without speaking or moving, the two siblings sat in each other's arms, allowing their inner peace to flow between them. To an outsider, it would appear to be nothing more than a straightforward embrace. But for the twins, it was different. It was a familiar feeling between the two, a strange warmth they hadn't experienced in a long time. To them, it felt as though they had returned to the place where they were created, their mother's womb. When enough time had passed and the twins had split up, Kim felt a little better and was genuinely happy when he saw his sister. The return of her brother's smile pleased Akaka, who said, "Good to see you back to your cheery self, brother." Kim nodded, stood, and thanked his sister in silence for putting her arm around her brother, saying, "Just so we're clear, you tell anyone about this little moment of sappiness and not only will I deny it, I kick your ass, are we clear?" When Kim felt a hand on his shoulder, he simply nodded his head and started to leave his room. As he was being literally dragged out of the compound, Kim didn't like where this was going. He looked around and saw his sister grinning, which was a bad sign. "Where do you think you're going? We still have one more thing to take care of." The Hyuga compound. In the hopes of entering the Hyuga compound without any issues, the twin Namikaze children had sprinted through the village as quickly as they could. But it wasn't their day today. The twins were on the verge of entering the compound to assist their friend, but the guards stationed at the entrance had other ideas and refused to let them in. Despite being aware of their identities and their close relationship to the clan's heirs, the two guards were under no obligation to like the Namikaze children. The two guards actually detested the Namikaze clan, just like many other Hyuga. The two sentries simply stood there with blank faces and said, "Gomen, but we cannot allow you in trance." Akaka, frustrated by the repeated response, had to ask, "Well, why the hell not, damn it?" Kim and Akaka did everything they could to persuade the guards to let them pass. Akaka and Kim recoiled at being referred to as animals, but the guards simply sneered, saying, "To put it simply so that you, animals, will understand." The guard went on, pointing at Kim. "We have been strict orders by Hanabi Sama not to allow any of your kind into the compound, especially you." The guards nodded their heads and said, "Hi, we were given orders directly from Hanabi herself and she made it very clear not to let you anywhere near her." Kim stood there in complete shock, wondering why Hanabi would not want him around, as he started to imagine that she hated him. The young lichen stood there blinking, "Me?" When Akaka learned of this, she was equally as shocked as her brother. She knew that Hanabi, whom she had known her entire life, would never want to be apart from Kim at any cost. Akaka chose to use her cunning to get past the guards because they wouldn't be accommodating. Putting her hand on her brother's shoulder, she attracted his attention by saying, "Brother, we should leave. It's obvious that we are not getting past these guards. We should respect their wishes and leave." Kim turned to face his sister, who was shocked to hear this. Akaka had never in her life shown respect to someone outside of her family voluntarily. Then he saw what appeared to be a red ball in his sister's hand. Kim grinned and said, "Agreed, sister, we should leave." When they saw the two animals bowing to their superiors and knowing their position, the two Hyuga guards smirked haughtily. The guards returned to their post after the twins have left, but not before noticing a red ball on the ground with writing on it. Upon closely examining the ball, both guards noticed that the word, "Boom," was written on it. The two guards were blinded when the ball abruptly burst into a painfully bright light. Kim and Akaka fled into the compound as the two guards covered their eyes in agony, but not before Akaka gave them the finger salute. Reminiscent of their previous visits and the familiar scent of Hanabi, the twins ran around the compound. The other Hyuga guards were scouting the compound for any intruders, and the two tried their best to stay out of sight. The guards, who for some reason never used their Byakugan, which could see through and easily spot them, were able to keep the twins out of what would be considered normal sight. The twins were fortunate that the Hyugas were a powerful clan, but they were also conceited, not as conceited as the Uchiha, but still quite awful. It wasn't easy, and the twins had been looking for their friend for more than 30 minutes. Hanabi appeared to have chosen to leave her room and relocate to a different area of the compound for an odd reason. This raised yet another query about their Hyuga friend's whereabouts. The two eventually got a reprieve after Kim discovered a tiny but detectable amount of Hanabi's scent. Lead the twins along the trail and into an area of the compound that neither of them had previously visited during their permitted compound visits. They now viewed this location as being intended for clan members who valued solitude and seclusion above all else. The twins were now more perplexed than ever as to why Hanabi would wish to be in an area where people only went to get as far away from one another as possible. As the scent grew stronger, the two twins continued to follow it, getting closer and closer. The twins knew they were getting close as they continued to follow Hanabi's scent through the hallways. The twins were reluctant to proceed further after they had moved down the hallway because they could now detect another scent in the air, Neji, which they had been familiar with from Hanabi. Kim and Akaka had known Neji for as long as they had known Hanabi and Hinata, and they were aware of his intense hatred for them. It was occasionally difficult to determine why he hated them. It appeared that he shared the majority of his clan's beliefs and simply detested lichens because they were able to. Sometimes, though, he appeared to agree with his clan's elders and thought lichens were just untamed creatures that should be subdued. When it came to Naruto and Hinata, it was time to at least provide a rational explanation. Whatever the true motivation was, Neji maintained it as the basis for his animosity toward the Namikaze clan and the lichen race. Both twins stayed hidden because they knew that Neji wouldn't let them see Hanabi alive, regardless of whether they were friends with her. The twins stayed out of Neji's sight in the hopes that he hadn't noticed them yet and that they would have enough time to devise a scheme against him. He knew they were there and made it obvious that he was serious when he said, "I know you two are there, come out now." Too bad for them. The twins emerged from hiding and resisted the older Hyuga, putting on a brave front but really feeling afraid of the older male in front of them. Even with all the luck in the world, they knew they couldn't compete with Neji because he was faster, stronger, and didn't mind breaking a few ribs when he felt like it. The elder Hyuga demonstrated that he had no intention of moving out of their way by standing in front of the room where Hanabi's scent was strongest. Neji asked the twins, "What do you two little beasts think you're doing here?" while maintaining the same expressionless expression that was seen on all of the other Hyuga. Kim said, "We came here to see Hanabi-chan. Please let us pass Neji-san." Akaka looked at her brother, shocked that he could actually say such a thing about Neji, but she remained vigilant just in case. Both Kim and Akaka could hear the icy and cruel words literally tumble off his lips as Kim spoke. Akaka gritted her teeth in rage and said, "Why the hell not? I get that you hate us, but why would you stop the only people who could really help her? Neji smirked as she turned to face the young boy. I'm afraid I can't let that happen. Neji simply chuckled darkly, saying, my hatred for you filthy monsters has nothing to do with this, but I will admit it's an added bonus. Akaka growled angrily at Neji, and if Kim hadn't interrupted her, she would have said something. Then why are you doing this? The boy yelled, letting his frustration and rage out. Neji did not say anything. Why, to put simply, for something like you to understand, I'm happily following Hanabi. Sama order of keeping you away from here. Neji simply shrugged his shoulders and said, honestly, I don't really know either. What I do know is that after she had recovered from her injury, Hanabi Sama ordered of her things to this part of the compound and then made it clear that neither of you were allowed near her. The twins were obviously perplexed and had to ask Neji, why would Hanabi Chan want us to stay away from her? We're friends. When Akaka learned that Hanabi had only issued the warning after she had fully recovered from her injury, she blinked. In an attempt to piece things together, Neji asked, Neji, where were you the ones who moved Hanabi's belongings here? Not understanding why Akaka would want to know, Neji simply nodded her head. Did you actually see Hanabi at any time or give the order? Neji briefly allowed a look of bewilderment to appear on his face. No, even though I heard her give the order, I haven't actually seen her. In fact, only her mother and sister have met Hanabi Sama in person since the incident. Akaka nodded as he began to notice this image. As she worked, this Neji was also attempting to comprehend Hanabi's behavior. He chose to devise his own solution and provoke the two people in front of him since he was unable to understand any of the reasons why Hanabi would behave in this manner. Since they had already entered the compound, Neji could get away with any charge, even if they were the offspring of a clan leader. After all, he would have to defend himself if they attacked him. As he considered the appropriate words, Neji put on a sly smile and said, but I might have a theory as to why she would do it. Kim and Akaka noticed the smirk and were not pleased with it, saying, perhaps Hanabi Sama has finally seen the light and now understand what kind of monsters you are. The twins recoiled at his smirk, which made Neji's grin grow wider. Akaka was becoming really irritated with Neji's snobbish voice and being called animals. Kim, however, was experiencing a different kind of impact. Unlike his sister, who was furious, Kim took Neji's words seriously and started to believe them. Kim allowed Neji's words to pierce his consciousness in his mind, along with the memories of what he had done to Moi and the suffering and guilt it caused. Kim still had some scars from the incident, even after hearing his sister's words and feeling a sense of relief. Even though he had done it to protect Hanabi, he still felt bad about it because what he had done was terrible, and Neji's admission that he was the reason Hanabi was acting in this way caused him to suffer unbearably. When Akaka noticed her brother's distress, she knew he was losing his composure, and she refused to let it happen. She was aware that Neji's words were having an impact on him and that if she did nothing, Kim would relapse into his depression. She also did not want to endure all that mushy nonsense once more. Given her brother's lack of resolve and Neji's reputation as a brick wall jackass, Akaka realized she would need to manipulate both boys' feelings in order to achieve her goals. Since she was an attack first, talked later type of person, she detested having to use considered language and taking advantage of someone else's emotions and feelings. Neji, do you really and truly care for the being of Hanabi? Akaka asked, rolling her eyes. The older Hyuga looked at Akaka curiously, wondering why she would ask such a question. I'm asking if you are following these orders because you part of the branch family or that you really give a damn about her. Akaka pulled his chain repeatedly after noticing that she had captured Neji's attention. Neji became irritated that his animal would doubt his allegiance to his family. He merely responded, while I proudly follow the orders of the main family without question, I would have done this even without being told. Hanabi-san like Hinata-san is like a sister to me and I will protect them, especially from you, with a scuff. Kim observed his sister solving a problem through dialogue rather than by punching her way through it, as was her custom. As she attempted to maintain his attention, Akaka kept her gaze fixed on Neji. So you care for Hanabi Chan like a sister and would do anything to protect Hanabi Chan. Neji nodded his head. So if you really wanted to help Hanabi Chan, you let my brother talk to her. Both boys gave Akaka a strange look when they heard this, obviously not understanding what Akaka was attempting to say. How would letting a filthy beast like you near Hanabi-san help in any way? Neji asked, glaring at the young lichen. Akaka faked a smile that resembled her older brother's when he was mischievous. Neji nodded his head, unable to deny that the male beast was the only person outside the family who could relate to her. Akaka said, Neji, you and I both that out of all the people in this village Hanabi Chan is closest to my brother. Both boys saw this and knew they were about to become scared. "What is your point?" he asked, unwilling to give the lichen girl the pleasure of having his head nodded. Neji nodded his head. "So unless you want Hanabi to keep repressing herself from everyone and possibly seeking into a deeper form of depression that may result in the worst-case scenario." Akaka could tell she was getting under the older boy's skin, so he replied, "Since my brother is so close to Hanabi, he is probably the only one Hanabi will let near her and talk to her." Neji looked at Akaka with some confusion, not understanding what she was talking about until he at least connected the terms, depression, and worst case. When it finally hit him, he wished it hadn't, and he asked the girl, wide-eyed, Are you implying that Hanabi-san would take her own life?" Kim looked at his sibling in shock that she would make such a suggestion. The two male lichens glanced at the female to see if she was acting suspiciously, but they could tell she was being sincere. Even though Neji detested the creature in front of him and wished he could permanently close her mouth with a Juken strike, Akaka simply put on a grim face and said, "It's possible, but it can be avoided." There was a tiny voice in his head telling him that what Akaka said might be true and that he still wanted to keep his family safe even though he detested the Namikaze. He looked at Akaka and asked, "What do you need to do?" clenching his teeth at what he was about to do, which he felt would probably haunt him into this dying breath. Akaka grinned, relieved that she had managed to reach the obstinate Hyuga bastard. Akaka grinned like a fox and gestured to her brother, saying, "Just let him talk to her." Both men turned to face Akaka and asked, "Nani?" Akaka could see that her meager trust in Neji had all but evaporated, and Kim simply stood there, flushed. Neji nodded his head in agreement as Akaka cut him with her hand before he could reply. "You agree that these two have a special relationship, right?" Kim just stood there, trying to reply, W. We're just friends." The redhead responded, "Right, and you just happen to turn anyone who hurts your friends into a chew toy, brother?" Kim simply glared at his sibling. "Well, you would just for fun, especially if someone hurt Konohamaru-san." Akaka blushed and punched her brother in the arm, saying, "Shut up, Baka." Neji and Akaka simply rolled their eyes at this. Neji's patience was already paying off, as the twins turned to face the young Hyuga and glared at him, saying, Yeah, keep your panties on already. Just open the door and get my brother in there." Neji asked, "If you're going to do anything that is of use, can you do it today?" With a nod, Neji took a key out of his coat pocket and unlocked the Hanabi room's door. After opening it slightly, he said, "Hanabi Sama, Namikaze Akaka and Namikaze have requested an audience with you." There was initially silence, but then a voice from the shadows said, "No, I order you to stay out." Kim and Akaka both flinched at the sound of the shout. Although they could recognize their friend's voice, they couldn't recall ever hearing her speak in that manner in all the time they had known her. Neji stood there contemplating whether or not to do as he was told. At least until he noticed Kim standing behind him, his eyes beseeching. Before Hanabi could reply, Neji pushed Kim into the room and shut the door. Neji sighed, "Gomen Hanabi Sama, but I'm afraid that I will have to ignore this order for your own good." Kim was standing in the center of his friend's dim, gloomy room. Because there was no window and only a few candles were producing light, he could hardly see anything with his eyesight. But Kim noticed a figure sitting in the center of the room in the light. Kim could tell that the individual was close to his age and smelled like a woman. Her long black hair and familiar scent were difficult to distinguish due to the airborne mixture of salt and tears. Kim was aware that this was his friend, but he found it painful to look at her because she seemed so aloof and depressed. He stepped forward in Hanabi's direction and heard her heartbeat quicken as Kim stopped moving in fear. Inhaling deeply, Kim said to his friend, "Hanabi-chan, it's me." When Hanabi heard his voice, she recoiled in terror and, for some reason, covered her face as though concealing something. He couldn't identify what it was, but Kim could tell she was terrified of something that had to do with him. Kim continued to move forward. "Hanabi-chan, I know what happened at the academy was painful. The things Moi said and did to you were unforgivable, and I made sure Moi paid for what he did even if it was something beyond my control." She relaxed a bit upon hearing this, but she remained cautious and, for some reason, avoided looking at Kim. "Is that why you're acting like this, Hanabi-chan?" Kim asked, his voice breaking and tears welling up in his eyes. "Is it because of what I did to Moi? Is this about how I acted like a monster and attacked him? Do you hate me now, Hanabi-chan?" Kim took this painfully and thought he understood what was happening. After a few moments of silence, Hanabi replied, "No, I don't hate you, Kim-kun." Kim felt somewhat relieved, but she was still perplexed, asking, "Then why are you acting like this, Hanabi-chan?" Hanabi took a deep breath and answered, because, I don't want you to see me like this Kim-kun. I don't want you to see what the Teme did to me, and, I don't want to lose you. After hearing this, Kim was even more perplexed than when he first walked in. I moved to the front of Hanabi, not understanding what she was talking about, and noticed that she was still hiding her face with her hands. Kim was intrigued by this and wondered why Hanabi would want to conceal what he believed to be an angel's face. Not wanting to rush things or do something foolish that would destroy their friendship, Kim asked his friend the only question he could think of. Hanabi-chan, do you trust me? Hanabi didn't answer out loud, but she did nod her head in agreement. Kim put his hands over hers and started to take them off slowly. Nevertheless, he sensed that Hanabi was having difficulty holding her hands together. Please Hanabi-chan, you can trust me with anything. I will never betray the one that is most important to me. It was either the words or the fact that they were from Kim that made Hanabi smile. Either way, she stopped struggling and despised the reason she had fled. Hanabi's eyes widened when Kim and he were able to get her to take off her hands and reveal her face. Kim noticed a deep scar on Hanabi's face that began beneath her left eye, crossed her nose, and ended above her right eye. Kim was suddenly able to comprehend Hanabi's desire to conceal her face after seeing this. Although Hanabi's eyes were deeply scarred, the attack was designed to cause damage, but the Mwa executed it carelessly. There was no way for cosmetic surgery or makeup to cover up the deep and obvious wound. Kim could now see why Hanabi would wish to hide after seeing this. She was a proud member of the Hyuga clan, but that didn't change the fact that, despite being a ninja.in training, she was still a young girl who wanted to look good. But because of this scar, she would stand out from the other girls with perfect faces, and many of the girls would be attracted to her. However, Kim didn't feel disturbed at all, whereas others might find a face with scars bothersome. Kim's heart actually beat more quickly when he looked at the young girl's facial markings than when he was with Hanabi. He kept his eyes on the girl's face, admiring its natural beauty as well as the intimidating and alluring flow that accompanied it. Hanabi was sitting there observing the young man who was simply staring at her. The longer he did this, the more self-loathing she felt, thinking that she had lost her best friend, and the more tears began to well up in her eyes. She was on the verge of crying when she saw that Kim's face was flushed, almost as if he was blushing. When Hanabi discovered that she could speak, he asked, Kim-kun, why are you blushing Kim-kun? Kim blushed more deeply and turned his head away, saying, No Hanabi-chan, why would I? Hanabi mistook this for an insult, thinking that Kim-kun didn't want to be around someone as ugly as me. Because Hanabi said the wrong thing to cover up his embarrassment, Kim realized this and started to panic at the prospect of losing him. As soon as he noticed that Hanabi was turning away, Kim grabbed her shoulders and said, Hanabi, wait. I was lying. I was blushing at you. When the boy went on, I don't think you're ugly Hanabi-chan, you've always had the beauty of angel, even now. Hanabi was clearly taken aback by Kim's confession and started crying when she heard it. I have always thought you're pretty Hanabi-chan, even now I can't help but lose myself by looking at you. Hanabi was moved by Kim's words, but she also remembered the scar and put a finger to her face, saying, But what my scar? Whether it was instinct or not, Kim was unable to express it as he put his face near Hanabi's and kissed the scar in the middle. As he withdrew, Kim and Hanabi both had deep red blushes. Hanabi was rendered speechless by what Kim had done, and before she could even form a word, Kim said, I like your scar, I think it makes you more attractive and tough. At this, Hanabi reached up to embrace Kim, her eyes welling with tears, and she said, Arigato Kim-kun. Beyond Hanabi's chamber, Akaka kept her ear to the door to listen in on what was happening while Hanabi and Kim were enjoying their moment. Akaka glared at the Hyuga, unconcerned with his words, and why not smarty pants? She said childishly as this Neji shook his head in disapproving fashion while she was working. You can stand there all day but you're not going to hear a thing, Akaka said. With a smug smile, Neji responded, It won't work because a seal is placed on all of the doors and walls in every room of the compound. Akaka heard this and realized she would regret asking, So what do these seals do exactly? Neji simply grinned and said, It prevents anyone from outside the room from seeing anything or hearing anything with the Byakugan. When Akaka heard this, she blushed because the Hyuga bastard behind her was making a fool of her. But then another thought crossed Akaka's mind. Why would you have a seal that prevents you from seeing through walls? What, do you watch your own family undressing or something? Akaka said this in jest, but Neji didn't respond, so Akaka took notice. You hentai, I can't believe you actually spy on your own family, you sick hentai. Neji couldn't help but blush as Akaka continued to point at Neji while making gestures. The door to Hanabi's room was missed by the two during this time, and Kim and Hanabi left. When he noticed the odd behavior, he had to ask, "What's going on here?" Akaka looked at her brother and asked, "Brother, did you get Hanabi-chan out?" As she heard her brother's voice and forgot what she had called Neji. Instead of answering, Kim merely shifted slightly to the left to indicate that Hanabi was following him. When Akaka finally saw her friend, she grinned and said, "Hey Hanabi-chan, it's good to see." However, before she could finish her sentence, she recognized the scar that read, "Holy Mother of Crap," and acknowledged it. Hanabi winced when he heard Akaka's reaction to her scar. As her friend, she hoped Akaka wouldn't be so direct or at least not make a big deal out of her new facial marking. Hanabi knew that people would not think twice about using her as a source of amusement and laughter after witnessing the response of someone she regarded as a close friend. Kim was about to withdraw back into her room, feeling the last of the courage she had summoned, when she felt someone's arms encircle her. Hanabi was shocked to see Akaka instead of Kim, as she had expected. Hanabi found it odd to watch her tomboy friend act in this way, but it was nothing in comparison to what transpired next. Hanabi would have spoken to the redhead after noticing that Akaka's grip had tightened and that something wet was dripping onto his shoulder. She noticed that Akaka was crying as she pulled away from her friend to investigate. Hanabi, who was utterly perplexed as to why her friend would do this, was about to inquire when Akaka said, "Hanabi-chan, Gomen." Hanabi pondered what Akaka could be sorry for after hearing this. She had done nothing wrong, so there was no justification for her to feel sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything to help Hanabi-chan. If I were stronger I could have," Akaka said, standing there and wiping away her tears. As Hanabi heard her friend's confession, she grinned, knowing that she had a strong will to succeed. She did have a weakness, though, and that was that she would suffer more than any psychological injury if she was powerless to assist. Unwilling to witness Akaka in this state, Hanabi embraced her friend and tried to soothe him by rubbing her back, saying, "It's okay, Akaka-chan, I'm not angry with you." As she wiped away the last of her tears, Akaka said, "Arigato Hanabi-chan," to calm herself down. Just so we're clear, this moment of snappiness never happened. Akaka said this in a playful yet threatening tone, and then she punched Hanabi in the arm in jest, saying, "We clear?" Hanabi nodded her head and rubbed her arm. Following Akaka's final call to Neji, a pervert, the three friends started to make their way to the Hyuga compound's entrance. When they arrived at the entrance, Kim and Akaka could feel Hanabi's anxiety as she considered the reactions of others to her scar. The twins each took Hanabi's hands before she could retreat, demonstrating their support as they went on. Hanabi's mood started to improve halfway through the village when she noticed that few people were making fun of her scar or chatting behind her back. Kim was happy to see Hanabi in this happy state and was pleased to see her like this. Although happy for her friend, Akaka felt a little envious that Hanabi had already received her first battle scar despite not being a shinobi. She thought this was so unfair. With Hinata and Naruto in one of the training grounds, Hinata was lying on a tree with Naruto's head resting on her lap while the two lovers rested. Hinata would giggle as she slowly stroked Naruto's facial whisker marks, evoking a purring sound from him. Even though she was acting composed, Naruto could tell that Hinata was still concerned about Hanabi. Hinata looked at her lover, hoping she would feel the same way, but there was always a tiny bit of doubt that lingered. Naruto saw the distress and put his hand against her cheek, saying, "Hinata-chan, don't worry, call it a hunch, but I have a feeling that Hanabi is being well taken care of. Well, at least that brat moi is going to be punished. After all, I'm sure both our families are going to ask for some kind of payment for what he did." Naruto tried to think of something quickly to help Hinata get out of her current state of mind, but Hinata shook her head and said, "No, after the incident and Moi was hospitalized, his father immediately disowned him so he wouldn't have to pay either of our families." With a venom in her voice, Hinata said, "Hi, from what I've heard, Moi's father decreed his son to be a liability and tossed him aside, saying Moi was bad for business." Naruto stared at Hinata, his mouth hanging open, and asked, "Are you serious, Hinata-chan?" Naruto could not understand why a man would disown his own son because in the Namikaze clan, the family has a pact and sticks together no matter what. Naruto threw off his rage and composed himself while observing his girlfriend, who was still wearing a worried and stressed expression. In an attempt to relieve the young vampire of her troubles, Naruto moved closer and kissed her. Fortunately for him, it did, as Hinata appeared to melt into Naruto's kiss and start to loosen up a bit. Both of them felt much more at ease and somewhat better about the situation after they had split up. As the sun began to set, Hinata grinned and said, "Arigato Naruto-kun, I needed that." Naruto simply grinned and said, Anytime Hinata. Chan. Anytime. Hinata laughed at her boyfriend's antics. The two grinned at this, and although sunsets are thought to be the ideal setting for romantic moments, it was what followed that the two relished the most. Naruto cherished moments like this one, where he was standing next to a stunning girl as a gorgeous night and, of course, a full moon approached. Tomorrow I get my teammates and begin my journey as a shinobi, and tomorrow I perform the ceremony and become a true Hyuga, were the only thoughts that crossed the minds of the two people standing there. Before the beauty of nightfall descended upon them, the two exchanged glances and smiled. Office of the Hokage. Sitting in his office, Minato reviewed his daily paperwork. He was currently working with this year's graduating class. Together with a few advisors, Minato carefully examined each student's profile in order to identify a compatible pair. There would not be enough students to meet the graduation quota, according to an analysis of the current graduating class. In an attempt to place each student on a team that had a remote possibility of cooperating, Minato was going through each student's file. Examining two specific files, one involving the Hyuga heiress Hinata and his own son Naruto. Minato was confident that they would be a fantastic team. Unfortunately, in the past, working with a Hyuga had been prohibited by others, including the clan elders. Even though relations with the younger generation had improved recently, many people continued to harbor bigotry and hatred. Minato decided that it was time to take a break and unwind, so he reclined in his chair and inhaled deeply. Until a man in a dragon mask showed up. Anyway, in order to give Minato time to appear as professional as possible, the man bowed to his leader. Report Dragon.san. Dragon nodded. Hokage. Sama, I was informed to remind you that today is the day you visit prisoner D.1. At this, Minato arched an eyebrow and chastised himself for overlooking something so significant. Arigato Dragon.san. Please inform your caption that I will be arriving soon. Turing turned to face the Anbu, who nodded and departed. Minato is reclining in his chair and contemplating his next meeting with D.1. Minato suddenly had an idea that, if it came to pass, would allow him to fulfill the graduation requirement and release D.1 from prison. He just needed to persuade her to follow through. AKA. Limbo. In Anbu prison. Minato strolled through the corridors of Limbo, a high-security Anbu prison. 3 Anbu members were standing in front of him, keeping an eye on him to make sure nothing bad happened. Limbo remained a prison for the most dangerous S-class shinobi in the elemental nations, even though Minato was a cable shinobi. Despite being viewed as dangerous, these men and women were essentially children in comparison to prisoner D.1. D1 was twice as strong and 3 times as deadly as the other inmates in Limbo. She had never even heard of the concept of mercy, and because of her immense strength, the entire prison wing was given to her in order to prevent a carnage. Although Minato disagreed with what was being done to her, he knew that releasing D.1 into the civilian population at that time was too risky, and he was unable to release her into the village until she demonstrated that she was ready. Despite her youth, Minato was incredibly dangerous and uncontrollable when she first met D.1. If she felt threatened, she wouldn't think twice about killing everyone in her path. Luckily, Minato always had a backup plan, and this time was no exception. He promised to help D.1 get what she wanted because he knew what she wanted. Minato turned to his guards as he stood in front of the cell door and informed him that they wouldn't be required. The guards wanted to object, but Minato told them he would be alright and told them to go back to their regular tasks, which they did. Going into the room containing D.1. The cell was a sizable, unexpectedly spacious room that didn't resemble a cell until you counted the charka. Sealed bars. A large bookshelf, a couch, a stained glass window, and an extremely old grandfather clock were among the many items that one would see in a typical cell. Minato observed some changes in the cell from his previous visit with D1, saying, "You have done some nice work with the flowers since my last visit, Lilith-chan." When she said, "They are poisons and carnivorous, I insist you don't touch them, human," a figure in the shadows turned to face the blonde Hokage with a gloomy frown. When Minato heard this, he saw that one of the flowers was getting close to his finger and was about to bite. "Long time no see, Lilith-chan, how have you been? Have the guards been treating you right? Are you eating healthily?" Minato asked Lilith as he turned away from the flower. Her frown didn't go away, rather, it seemed to get deeper, indicating that she was growing irritated. As usual, Minato wanted to get right to the point with Lilith because she was clearly not in the mood for small talk today. Minato inhaled deeply and simply said, "I would like you to become a shinobi," hoping it would work. Minato could tell Lilith was suspicious, and rightfully so, given who she was, but he had to try. Lilith looked surprised, but she quickly covered it up so as not to show such weakness in front of a human. She calmly asked, you wish for me to become one of your shinobi. For what purpose? With each new genin, 3 of them are put into team and are expected to work together, but there is a slight complication with the poetical genin this year, Minato explained, crossing his arms and taking a deep breath before speaking. Lilith, in our village, the children who wish to become shinobi join what called the academy, where they learn the basic of the way of the shinobi. After years of training, they given a test to show if they truly have potential, and if they pass they are allowed to become official genin of the village. Minato glanced at Lilith, who was barely paying attention. Lilith, who was now irritated, chose to roll her eyes at the dramatic behavior of the person in front of her rather than simply saying, "What kind complications, and please just spite it out already, human." Minato became so irritated that she finally said, "We are short on genin this year and I would like you to fill in that spot." Lilith arched an eyebrow at his suggestion and gave it some thought. If she accepted, she would be free to leave her cage and carry out the research she desired without facing any more obstacles. The drawback was the idea that she would have to work both with and beneath humans, which made her stomach turn. Even though it was a difficult decision, the benefits might outweigh the danger. Lilith nodded in agreement as she looked at Minato and said, "Okay, I'll do this, but I imagine there will be some kind of restrictions that I will have to follow in order to be allowed out." Graduation room at the Academy 20. 7 children in room 300 of the Shinobi Academy are wearing headbands that identify them as proud ninjas of the leaf, and their journeys are just getting started. Their years of training and, for whatever reason, becoming ninja were about to pay off. They now awaited word from their sensei about who they would be collaborating with at the beginning of their careers. It was the hope of many that they would be matched with someone they liked or at least knew somewhat. But until their sensei arrived and told them, all they could do was hope. As ninjas, some kids were busy boasting about what they would see and accomplish. People kept to themselves because they didn't want to interact with the kids because they thought they were either too young or beneath them. Naruto and Hinata were 2 of these kids sitting next to each other, just talking and flirting a little. They were waiting for their names to be called so they could be with their teams, but in the meantime, they wanted to spend time together even though they knew they wouldn't be able to. Although they had hoped to be on the same team, they were aware that it was extremely unlikely because their family had never permitted a Namikaze and Hyuga to be on the same genin team. Wanted to spend every second they had together up until that point. 2 males in chunin vests came into the room. A man with silver hair and another with a scar across his nose came next. They were Ruka and Mizuki, 2 of the Academy's senior instructors who had instructed the kids in front of them ever since they arrived and would be the ones to send them off into the world of shinobi. For his final lecture, Uruka, the man with the scar on his nose, stood in front of his students. He had spent years with these children, had gotten to know them well, and genuinely cared for them. He sincerely regretted doing this. Although it was difficult to watch them simply go and most likely never return, he had to fulfill the requirements of the job they had chosen. Uruka pulled out a clipboard to finish the speech and started calling off names one by one. A team number was assigned to each student's name. Some were pleased with their selection, while others were unhappy or unconcerned. Uruka found something a little strange after saying the majority of the names. Namikaze Naruto and Hyuga Hinata under Midarashi Anko? There was a brief period of silence before several other students started to shout that the 2 were receiving preferential treatment because of who their families were and that this was unfair. Even though Naruto and Hinata were clearly embarrassed, they were nevertheless content because they would be together. Uruka had enough. Enough already, as the other students continued to complain about how unfair the team arrangements were. They turned back to the 2 clan heirs and said, "Naruto, Hinata, as ordered by the Hokage, you are to report to his office. Your 3rd teammate will also be there waiting for you as well." "That's what I thought. Next time try and think before you go and question the order of your superior officer." This kept everyone quiet and allowed their sensei to speak. The Hokage himself decided on the teams, so if you have a problem with how things are done, go to the Hokage and tell him yourself how unfair it is. The room fell silent. Uruka concluded by giving his students a final speech, dismissing them, and wishing them luck. Hinata and Naruto left right away and headed straight to the Hokage office, only stopping once or twice to make out. Office of the Hokage. Upon reaching their leader's office, Hinata and Naruto were greeted by a beaming Minato behind his desk, who said, "Well, it's about time you 2 showed up. It normally takes about 10 minutes if you come straight from the academy." The 2 blushed, and Naruto tried his best to conceal the bite marks all over his neck. "Hinata, Naruto, I asked you 2 to come here to meet your 3rd teammate," Minato said, laughing at the kids in front of him before turning serious. "Now, normally, since we always have enough students to form a 3-man team, such manners wouldn't be an issue." Naruto and Hinata nodded in agreement with the Hokage's statement that However, I did manage to find you a third teammate even if she is a little different. However, this year we were short on students and would have had to keep you two on hold until a third teammate was found, which would have taken a while and would have been a waste for you too. Naruto was about to inquire about his father's meaning when a kunai with a cloth attached burst through the window, revealing a huge sign that read, "Behold the great Mitarashi Anko," beneath which a purple-haired woman in a trench coat grinned calmly and said, "Yo." Minato, on the other hand, had a less than amused expression on his face. "Anko, what have I told you about breaking windows, mainly the ones in my office?" Both Naruto and Hinata just stared at the woman in front of them, their mouths hanging open, unable to think of anything to say. Minato maintained his stern expression as he spoke to his subordinate, "That's right, now, don't do it again, understand?" Anko pushed her fingers together in a Hinata-like manner while looking down at the ground. Anko nodded in response to this. "Hi, Hokage. Sama." That sounded professional but was actually a chibi Anko having a tantrum, saying, "He's so mean, I never get have any fun." Anko then turned to face Naruto and Hinata and grinned predatorily, saying, "So these two brats are going to be my students, huh?" Anko's tone of voice made her grin seem more savage, and Naruto and Hinata winced in terror. Prior to telling Anko to stop frightening her new students, there was a loud knock on the door. "Enter," Minato said in a clear, approaching tone, and 4 Anbu entered. 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and 1 in the center. The 4 Anbu looked at Minato, waiting for orders until she gave them to leave, which Minato did immediately. The 4 men followed instructions and started to leave, while the 5th remained. Now that they were gone, everyone could see who their new teammate was. The girl who was left behind stood in the center, looking over the people she would have to call teammates for the time being. Her eyes were purple and cat-like, and she had 2 large horns growing out of her forehead, curving slightly to the sides of her head, and a long, skinny black tail behind her. Additionally, she had shackles around her wrist, ankles, and wrists, each of which had a seal on it, as well as a black collar around her neck, which also had a seal on it, but it was a more intricate one. The creature in front of Hinata, Naruto, and Anko was obviously not human in appearance, but to those who could sense chakra, there was something demonic about it. Naruto, the group's outspoken member, approached the creature and started prodding her in the chest to determine whether or not she was real, asking, "So what is it, some kind of animal or something?" As Naruto continued to poke the creature in front of him, he was oblivious to the irritated and furious look on Lilith's face. Finally, she had had enough and told Naruto, "Stop picking me, you idiot." When Naruto heard this, he leapt back and pointed at her, saying, that thing, it talks. That thing can talk." Lilith rolled her eyes and glared at the blonde, answering, "Hi, I can talk, real amazing isn't you blonde-haired idiot." Naruto felt the need to respond in some way, such as, "Hey, shut up you, creature." Lilith simply blinked at the boy in front of her, amazed at how pitiful his return was, saying, "Wow, that's just sad, you really are an idiotic human, you idiot." Naruto snarled and bared his teeth in preparation for a fight, but before he could do so, Minato intervened and said, "Enough, you two will stand down now." Lilith and Naruto exchanged a glance before responding, "Hi, Hokage. Sama." It was good to see that they would at least pay attention to the advice that. Now, then this isn't how a team is supposed to react during their fist meeting. Naruto looked at his father in shock, saying, "Nani, this thing is supposed to be our teammate." Lilith rolled her eyes at the blonde's foolishness, saying, "Well, I am a demon and I'm standing right in front of you, so I guess demons do exist, stupid." The two were facing each other again, ready to fight, and Minato was giving him a headache. He wanted to know how she was feeling about everything, but oddly, he couldn't read any emotion on her face. Standing there with a blank expression on her face, Anko said softly, "I'm leading a team with bloodthirsty Hyuga, a savage Namikaze, and a real live demon under my command. This is the happiest day of my life." She did this while holding her fist in the air and crying as the other people in the room started to perspire. The 3 new genin looked at their leader in confusion as Minato, who had grown weary of this, said, "Now then, back to the matter at hand. As I've said, you 3 will be assigned as a team under Anko provided that you can pass her test, of course." Anko clarified, "See here, kiddies, the so-called test you did at the academy was just a way we used to weed out the pussies who don't have the rocks to be a shinobi. I'll put you brats to the real test to see if you have what it takes to be a true shinobi or to send you back to the academy. Additionally, the test itself has a roughly 67% failure rate." They all turned to Minato after hearing their sensei's colorful expiation to see if Anko was telling the truth, but he simply nodded his head and said, "I'm afraid that what Anko says is true." "Hey, are you little bastards calling me a liar?" Anko replied, but everyone ignored her. Minato went on. "Tomorrow you three will be given a test to show if you have what it takes to be considered true shinobi and not little children playing pretend. This is the real deal, whether you're ready or not, and you want special treatment." The three nodded, understanding what he meant when he said, "Hi, Hokage-sama. Please come here, Lilith. Chan, you can't do this test with chains on you," he said, turning the focus back to Lilith. As Minato performed the hand seals required to remove her restraints, Lilith walked over to him, trying not to trip, and Naruto noted his concern. "Hokage-sama, are you sure it's wise to allow this demon out of its restraints?" Lilith simply glared at him, not liking to be called an idiot more than once a day. "But if you must know, this collar around my neck seals away nearly all of my strength, leaving me as weak and pathetic as, well, you." While Minato was removing the last of her restraints, Naruto snarled at Lilith. After removing the cuffs with a final seal, she was able to move freely for the first time. She twisted her wrist back and forth to relieve the tension, almost missing Minato's question about how she was feeling. "Mind your own damn business," was her response. Oddly, Minato didn't answer in any way, but he did have a kind smile around her. Minato looked at them and said, "Now that's done with, you three are free to go." The three started to leave, but Minato repeated, "Also, just as a word of advice, you three should get to know each other and you knew sensei as well, it could help in the long run." The three of them looked at the Hokage and at each other before leaving his office, thinking, "I hope this works." The exterior of the Hokage tower. Outside the tower, Naruto, Hinata, and Lilith stood staring at each other, unsure of what to say or do. Despite the tension that hung over them, Hinata turned to face her new teammate, Lilith.san. The demon gazed curiously at the Hyuga, asking if she would like to join them for some ramen. Because she had nothing better to do, she agreed. "Why not? I have nothing better than to do than hang around with you humans." Naruto growled at this unlikely idea but remained silent. Both Naruto and Lilith stared at their teammate in confusion. Naruto couldn't understand why Hinata would want to spend time with this demon. While Lilith was interested in the Hyuga's intentions and the substance, she gestured, "Ramen." Ramen shop in Ichiraku. The proprietors of the small ramen shop, Tucci and his daughter Iyame, welcomed the three as they walked in. When they realized they had just walked in, they grinned and said, "Well, it's the Loverbirds, on another date are we?" Hinata and Naruto both flushed, and Lilith looked at the two bewildered, obviously not understanding what was happening. Three sat down and started ordering. Hinata ordered a basic miso ramen, while Naruto ordered 3 extra beef ramens. Because she had never tried ramen before, Lilith just sat there unsure of what to order. It was difficult for her to decide because she had never eaten ramen before, and the shopkeeper, an elderly man, kept staring at her until Iyame pushed him for staring too long. Lilith finally settled on a bowl of beef ramen and continued to order it because she found it to be enjoyable. "Will you two stop staring at me already?" Hinata asked politely as she noticed her teammates were observing her with interest while she was eating. The two blushed but did not turn away. "So Lilith.san, can you tell us a little about yourself?" Hinata asked. Hinata and Naruto just stared at her, expecting more, but Lilith looked at the young Hyuga, not understanding what she was trying to do, but it couldn't hurt to tell them a little about herself. "My name is Lilith, I'm a demon. And, I like to garden. Stop staring at me, damn it." Hinata and Naruto did just that out of the blue after deciding that the wall across from them was fascinating to look at. Naruto and Hinata continued the introduction after they thought Lilith had calmed down. Hinata then said, "My name is Hyuga Hinata. I am the heiress of the Hyuga clan. My likes are Naruto.kun, cinnamon buns, my family, and blood." Lilith looked at Hinata in a strange way, not anticipating that last part, while Naruto continued, "Namikaze Naruto, heir to the Namikaze clan. My likes are Hinata. Chan, ramen, full moons, and my family." Lilith turned to her two teammates and said, "You're wired, but I like you, bluntly, you're an idiot." Both teammates responded to Lilith in a humorous manner, but Hinata blushed and laughed nervously. Lilith grinned and said, "Well, it seems like my brats are getting along rather nicely." Naruto, on the other hand, was red with rage and growling at her, clearly upset about being called an idiot once more. Three turned to see Anko sitting next to Lilith, with 3 bowls of ramen, 12 dango skewers, and a cup of tea. How long has she been sitting there? The new genin wondered. Anko grinned as she listened to her new team discuss their likes and dislikes. "Okay, you brats, now that we've gotten to know each other and all this warm and fuzzy crap is done with, I feel it time to shatter whatever joy you're feeling in the most painful of ways. Three people didn't like where this was going, but first, Enko gave Lilith a Kohana headband and said, "You can't be a kick-ass shinobi with your headband." Lilith took the item and held it close, and she wrapped it around her right arm. In actuality, this was the first gift she had received in a long time. The three's hope of passing was dwindling at this point, so Enko decided to explain why she was here. "Alright brats, listen up." They paid attention because they were afraid of what Enko would do if they didn't. "I expect you to be there around 6 in the morning sharp. Failure to do so will result in me killing you and feeding you to my snakes." With that, the last of the three's hope was gone, as Enko continued, "If by some miracle you were to pass, you will be true shinobi under me. You will be my unquestioning and loyal minions who shall follow my every command, from smiting my enemies to bringing me large amounts of dango without question." After Enko's tirade, she smiled innocently at her students and asked, "Well, any questions?" Lilith and Hinata were too scared to respond until Naruto asked, "Ya, what exactly are we going to be doing for this test?" Enko gave Naruto a bloodthirsty glare, saying, "How dare you ask questions, minion, but a good one nerveless." Naruto was now hiding behind Hinata, fearing what his sensei would do to him, and he said, "As for what we doing, I haven't decided." Everyone laughed at this, but Enko simply laughed. "Don't get me wrong, I have a few ideas, but they wouldn't exactly be approved by the Hokage." The training concept of Enko. The three students were all imprisoned in a pitch black room using twisted and crazy torture devices. Lilith was in a straight jack hanging over a big meat grinder, Naruto was in what appeared to be an iron maiden cabinet, and Hinata had a strange device that looked like a bear trap attached to her head. A pale-looking doll appeared on a TV that was soon turned on in the center of the room. The doll turned to face the genin and said, "Hello you three, I want to play a game." Idea for end training. As the three genin saw their psycho sensei start squealing like a naive little girl, they all became terrified and started to fear for their lives. After noticing their appearance, Enko smiled reassuringly and said, "Hey, don't worry you three, I wouldn't have asked to be your sensei if I didn't believe you had a chance at passing." The three felt a little better after hearing these words, so Enko got up and said, "Well, go and hear a gift before I leave." Enko then handed them a small suitcase-sized box, saying, "Well, open it already." They carefully opened the box, only to discover a small piece of paper that read, "Don't read this, it's a bomb," and it exploded in their faces. The only thing on the minds of the now ash-covered genin sitting at the ramen stand was what a nut shop their sensei was. Hinata looked between the two and was shocked that they had actually gotten along for the first time today. Although she didn't enjoy their fights, a chill went up Hinata's spine as if something terrible was about to happen. However, both Lilith and Naruto started to smile, saying, "Ya no, I like her, she cool." Lilith turned to her teammate, "I agree."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.